Welcome to the Cash Game World Championships hosted by Coin Poker. I'm Johan Merlo, your host. And today we're going to have a lot more high stakes action here with some amazing players. And for this, today I'm going to be joined by Ryan Risk. Did I say that right?
Yep, you got it right.
How's it going?
It's going good, man. I've been following this challenge a lot. It's cool to see some of the best just battling day in day out. So it's pretty fun to just have access to this almost around the clock.
And I believe you're well acquainted here with one of the players, Absolute Top Up, right?
Yeah, he's a colleague of mine. We work and study together. So I obviously will know his game the best, but it'll be interesting to see all the thing that's cool about high stakes is there's obviously a lot of similarities in how all these guys play, but there's also like things that everyone does a little different. So it's always interesting when you really analyze these spots, you can see some really, unique styles.
And do you guys do daily work on this, or is he more on his own, doing his homework and figuring stuff out?
Yeah, he's been working with us for the better part of like a year or so. And, as I think most poker players, you do a lot of study on your own, but then, when we kind of discover things we think are interesting, we'll get on calls and discuss. And then, we work together to coach our students as well. So, yeah, we spend a fair amount of time talking strategy.
And are you very happy, I'm guessing, with his current success, or do you feel like it's way too early in the World Championship to scream victory of any sort?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome that he's off to a great start, but as poker players know, like 4, 5, 6 sessions, a lot can go your way, so things can turn on a dime. But yeah, he's played very well. Obviously, we've reviewed a lot of the hands he's played, and it's been there's been some super interesting ones. But yeah, it's been a great start for him so far.
Okay, we see him in a hand here with I was only 17. Seems like not too much happened. This is blind versus blind action. And you see a small bet that gets raised on the river here. What do we think of this?
Yeah, I mean, when you check down to the river here, you're going to see a lot of small betting, and then in position is going to need to, first of all, he's going to have to check back some strong hands on the turn. There's going to be like two pairs, flushes, whatever. He's also just going to river a 6 here. Like, he's going to check back some 6x river. So it's, you're going to see, yeah. And as out of position, this is something you need to make sure that you're doing a lot of. You'll see value in this line, which he had. But yeah, you're going to want to make sure that that small size is protected so that someone, when you're playing against the best in the world, they're going to raise you more often than you're going to be used to when you bet that small size.
Is there a player that you've been, or maybe more than one, that you've been particularly impressed by so far from what you've seen in this?
I mean, it's always impressive to watch Linus, so that's like the easy answer, obviously. Yeah. I think everyone kind of gets drawn to just watching that guy play because he's been the best for so long. So I would say the bulk of my focus, being someone who's always just aspiring to get better, you kind of just look to who's the best, what are they doing, trying to learn from that. So I guess the easy answer is him. He's the one who I've paid the most attention to. Outside of that, I just kind of like, this is something I tell my students as well. Whenever you have access to content like this, what I try to do is, watch the hands and try and just like predict each action. So like on this texture, say we look at this one with the 7-5 deuce 2 diamonds, like what size am I expecting to see from the aggressor? Do I expect a lot of checks, that type of thing? And then when they do something different, think, oh, like, is that something that I would know how to play against? Like, why would they do that? Those type of things. Yeah. So yeah, I try to just look at each player's strategies and just try and learn a little bit from them.
And did you have a lot of moments on showdowns where you're like, okay, I really didn't expect that? I definitely had that because I play like smaller stakes, and then on rivers they showed up with a lot of like ace queen or ace king high against like a medium pocket pair, and like you don't get to see that too much. Let's say like in the lower stake, it's a lot of like nuts versus second nuts. If it goes to a showdown, it seems like.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of lines where if you're used to playing, say, smaller stakes or even mid stakes, you'll think like, oh, this line is either super overbluffed or super underbluffed, and then you'll see the showdowns, and obviously they'll surprise you, right? A line you'll be like, well, how do you even bluff this spot? And typically they've constructed their range in a way that they have hands typically people don't show up with on the river. The type of runouts where the average person runs out of bluffs, they've made sure that there's hands in the range that are still able to bluff those rivers.
And we see a big pot here on the top left-hand side. Daniel Vasilev with I was only 17. The board runs Queen Jack 9, Jack 10 on the river, and there's already 10k in the middle.
Yeah, and sorry, do we know the action going to the river? I'm assuming this was at 3-bet at some point.
Yeah, it must have been
3-bet.
I would assume 3-bet pre or maybe check raise on the flop. Button
Yeah.
against big blind.
So I'm assuming they've 1-1. So on this texture, I'm gonna assume all in or check, but they wouldn't surprise me if they randomly busted a small bet here. Goes for the all in, and we don't get to know the action. Like there's a spot where I think a lot of people would be what does my bluffing range look like in this spot kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Not the easiest spot. Like I forget. I've heard someone talked about this in the past, but like the being able to just find those very unnatural bluffs is very important when you're playing against players like this, where making a good hand and value betting isn't going to be enough to make money.
Yeah, from a certain level, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
We had a cooler actually on one of the tables here. I'm trying to pull it up. There. So we had the replay. We can see an open 3-bets, and then it pretty much all went in pre, and it was just ace king against kings, and we've seen a decent amount of those. Do you think that in this game, in those positions, somebody has ace king, somebody has kings, it's always going in no matter what?
Well, again, I would in these scenarios, you're not always supposed to 4-bet ace king. It's going to also depend on how deep they are pre-flop, but you want to make sure you have some ace king post flop in these spots, but very high frequency, because ace king is going to be a hand that 4-bets a lot, and then as king is going to be one of the hands that most often is just all in versus a 4-bet. You'll kind of slow play aces to trap your opponent's bluffs, but typically hands like kings and ace king suited are the hands that just like to, especially 100 big blinds deep, are going to mainly just go all in.
Yeah. Seems like we had a raise and a 3-bet here between Daniel Vasilev on the button and J. Sam Gale. Hope I said that right. Then we had a bet and a call. This board favors the 3-better, did you say?
The ace 7-7 deuce.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it to some extent. So obviously, so this is interesting. It must have went check flop, and he's going for. So here's Jason Gale. He plays kind of a different style than your typical reg. There's also another player. His name's escaped me, but he plays like 5x and limp, I think, small blind versus big blind. So there's some just like stuff that you're not necessarily used to.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he goes for looks like check flop, small bet turn.
I think it was a bet on the flop. I think there was 1800 in there.
Okay. So he went small twice, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is reasonable on this board. Like it makes sense to go small twice because, you want to be able to value bet like pretty aggressively, force your opponent to continue wide, and then as you kind of talked about, like it's good. So the small blind will have more like ace king and like potentially some more ace queen suited type of stuff. But in position will have a 7x advantage, so you don't necessarily want to just like go huge and let him kind of rely on that portion of his range. Very interesting to see small bet check call. But he just, I guess he blocks the 7x, unblocks some diamonds, so definitely reasonable. Like it's very difficult for when you're bluff catching in spots like that. Like what you kind of want to think was, it's very difficult for imposition to have an 8 in their hand that they're bluffing with. So actually having 2 8s makes it very, slightly more likely your opponent's bluffing than if you have, just like say pocket jacks with a diamond or something like that. Even though 8s to the average player looks like a worse hand, it actually will perform better as a call there. So yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Pretty interesting.
I really like your hand breakdowns, by the way. Like I think I followed your content on YouTube, and I think it was Instagram or Twitter as well. For a while, you even reviewed one of my hand one time. You asked people to submit some hands. I submitted one. So do you
okay? Yeah.
Do you plan on doing? Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was talking to Cocky T, and I was kind of wondering. I was like, how are we friends on Discord already? And that's again, that now I remember. Yeah, we've submitted hand way back when.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're definitely trying to up our content game moving forward. We part of that is Armin started to do some hand history reviews. He actually did a pretty interesting one recently on our YouTube channel where he reviewed some high stakes heads up hand he played on ACR. And we're probably going to be doing more content, especially since this is been a very fun and interesting challenge that's going on. So he'll probably review some of the more interesting hands he's played in this challenge on the YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that, like, if you plan on doing like review videos, that would be nice to hear from him and from you as well. I'm sure at the same time it would be a great duo to break down some of these hands.
Yeah, he's played some very interesting ones, and so yeah, and the good thing is a lot of them, like the format for this is great where you get to see whoever won the hand, they have to show their hand on a lot of the tables, and so the benefit is we can do some hand history breakdowns where maybe he wouldn't normally want to talk about what he had, but if the hand was already showed, then there's less secrets to hide, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe some players would be reluctant to explain their precise thought process behind it, but if he is, then it's all the better for anyone that's willing to watch and learn.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, what do we make of this hand here? CD9K and Jason Gale. On the turn, we see a re-raise that gets called.
Yeah, so a small bet raise, and they're playing pretty shallow, like stack to pot on river. So he's got 1/3 ish pot on the river. So again, these are spots that don't occur as much at lower stakes. Typically, you'll just see players go all in on the turn in this type of spot. I mean, you just see we'll say a pretty standard cooler.
Yeah.
Set versus an overpair. But I think you would see a lot of times on the turn, if you bet small and you get raised and you have pocket sevens there, you're kind of excited, assuming your opponent doesn't bluff a lot, so you're just going to stick it in. Whereas, in this scenario, they know, like, especially when he has sevens with a heart, it's going to make a pretty good hand to just call. And if your opponent is bluffing or value betting a hand like that, they're going to go all in on the river anyways.
Yeah, there's a lot more bluffs in these games than I feel like in the lower stakes, for sure. On the river, like, these guys have not been shy to actually fire big, go all in, sometimes even overbet. And Linus, so far, I feel like he's so good at calling these bluffs. Like, he's called so many. Like, obviously, sometimes he's been wrong, but so much of the time he's been right as well.
Yeah, he definitely, like, having talked with Armin, he's just like, he hasn't played a ton with Linus in the past, and just said, like, man, that guy is just, he never stops betting and raising. He's just super aggressive in all spots, right? And so the benefit of that is if you're always putting other people in tough spots, then you kind of know the counter strategy for when when someone does that to you, right? Like, I like to really bluff in this spot because it's tough for the other position for the other player, or I don't bluff that much in this spot because of what my opponent's range looks like.
Yeah, look at this overbet here. I was only 17 on ace 8-5 8-10 against Munez Star, who's rocking a StarCraft portrait, and he check raises 6.2 thousand.
But this was, I missed it, but big bet on river and check raise.
Yeah,
and we don't get to see the hand there.
We can rewatch.
Okay, yeah, let's check that one out.
Oh, whoops. Open. Missed seconds. There it is. Luckily we have the replayer because it's very hard to follow all the tables at once.
Yeah.
I'm in there, right?
This one, yeah.
Is this the one?
Yep, another one before that.
Oh. Okay.
This one, yep.
This. So this was raise and a defense from big blinds. Check on the flop, 8 on the turn. Then bet in position, call.
Check.
Yeah,
what size is it? It's hard to make out the exact size.
He bets like 2k plus into 1400.
Okay, yeah, so he overbets and gets raised, and so obviously once your opponent bets this big, he's repping a very strong hand. So it's going to mean that obviously the minimum hand that out of position is going to raise here is an 8. So he's going to definitely want to trap some ace 8 here. Makes sense to play that as a check call on the turn because when you have an ace and an 8, your opponent is unlikely to have either of those cards. So makes a natural trap. If he has a hand like king 8, that hand's typically going to either bet itself or check raise the turn. But he's also going to want to check call some weaker 8x. So like the 10 is actually kind of good for out of position because like a hand like 10-8 makes a reasonable check call on the turn and then boat up on the river. But yeah, he's going to want to bluff sometimes with actually some of his ace-x. And then if he ever has a hand like 10-5 on the river, low rake environment, so he's definitely gonna have some 10-5 suited to get to the river. That makes a really good bluff on the river as well.
All right. And we've got another big one here. Tobias Weiler and Daniel Vasilev. 6,600 in the middle on the river.
Let me see a jam.
Yeah, in position.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously minimum here. I mean, I guess you can't say for sure these guys, but minimum you would assume is a flush in this spot. And a relatively strong flush. I didn't see exactly, obviously, how this pot got to the river, but once you go all in here, typically representing like pretty strong flush here.
What's the minimum you would call with?
So out of position, in this spot, out of position is going to, again, I didn't see how they got to the river, so flush versus flush, pretty big cooler. So it's going to depend how out of position got to the river, whether or not they need to call, like, basically there's going to be certain spots you actually call worse than a flush here, obviously, right? So, yeah. You're going to call for the most part, most of your hearts to get to the river in this line, because a flush is a good hand, and your opponent isn't going to have like that many flushes. So it's bet flop call.
It was 3-bet free.
Yep.
And then check, bets, about half.
Yep.
Call. And on the turn it goes check and bet again, half again. Call. Then we would check and jam.
Yeah, so at 1-1 in this spot, you're gonna have to just call like a lot of your flushes. I mean, this is the type of spot where, looking at theory and how actual like practice plays out, there's gonna be a lot of opponents who don't know how to bluff this river as the in-position player. Obviously, these stakes are gonna be much different, but knowing how to start a bluff on this flop and arrive at this river, and then not just have ace of hearts, king of hearts type holdings, for that, and also to value jam thin enough. It's kind of like these spots are very obviously interesting. And then it's out of position, it's kind of just in a, obviously, like, in position is not going to shove worse than the 10 of hearts. So basically what you would do here is whatever you think your opponent's shoving for value, say the minimum hand he would shove, basically just call obviously that hand in better always. So if you assume your in position is going to shove, say the jack of hearts or better, then if you have, obviously the queen of hearts are better, you always call. The jack of hearts, probably mainly going to be call. And then anything other than that is basically a bluff catcher. Yeah. And there'll actually be certain hands that make better bluff catchers than a flush, just depending on your hole cards and stuff, right? So it could be like certain pocket pairs make bad bluff catchers because your opponent is supposed to be bluffing with, say, the offsuit card that you have. So like tens with a heart could actually be a not a great bluff catcher if your opponent's supposed to do a ton of bluffing here with hands like queen 10, jack 10 type holdings, right? So maybe you actually want to bluff catch the river when you have a card that just blocks his, maybe just like pocket queens no heart, because then you block like ace queen offsuit with a heart, or pocket jacks no heart, like those type of hands, right? So those spots become very very like nuanced, and show you how tough these spots are, especially when you're playing for this much money.
You have to factor in some potential pure bluffs as well, and I guess is it profile specific, or you expect like really any of these players to be able to mix those in as well? Because we've seen, I think once or twice I saw like on a 4 to a flush board, somebody on the river without having a flush actually went for the bluff, and I think they got called.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of these spots, when you look at, they don't feel great to bluff, especially when you bluff and get called. But if you look at how, even this spot again, like he jammed, and this guy had to had to tank call, a pretty strong hand, a 10 high flush, right? So if a 10 high flush is uncomfortable on the river, then you're not going to have the ace of hearts that often, or even the king of hearts that often. So great spot to bluff then, right? Yeah. I see also one of my former students, Matthias, is in the chat too. What's up, man? Good to see you.
Hello, Matthias.
Yeah, he was with us for a few years. He's now off on his own, grinding it up. But yeah, good to see you, man.
All right, let's see if we can get some more big hands here observed. And
Yeah, there's definitely not much of a, like, if you're watching this stream consistently, you're gonna see like pretty big pots on the regular. Like that's another big difference you'll notice when you're watching high stakes players is the frequency at which bets go in. Both like C bets, raises, just like the bets per street. There's a lot of stakes where you're not going to see like bet, check raise, 3-bet, like that type of stuff as much. But yeah, there are definitely some fun pots to see when they're just betting and raising all the time.
Yeah, they generally play pretty fast, especially on river. Like somebody's sometimes, like, I mean, maybe it's like it's just obvious for them. And also, like, if you're the caller, you have like 20 seconds to think about it. If you're going to call a jam, you've already made your decision. But I'm almost surprised at how fast they've played sometimes, especially Linus. Like, it just seems like when he was in the zone, he was just so fast, like calling just shoves, stacks were flying left and right.
Yeah, I mean, some of it obviously comes like that guy is. It's insane how many hours he can play. I think he was like, someone said he was like 8 tabling the other day, just like playing for like 10 hours or whatever. I don't know, just crazy to be able to play this. When your competition is this tough for that many hours, and still be playing like very well on hour 9. It's just crazy.
He's been playing some long hours. Like I saw him often play in the afternoon and late at night. He doesn't go to sleep that late from what I saw, like usually, 2, 3 a.m. And I was theorizing that maybe some players were going to try and start playing a little bit later if they don't really want to play with him as much, because it has to be difficult on the win rate, right, to play with Linus. Like, I don't think too many people will be confident that they can do consistently well against him.
Yeah, for sure. That was a pretty small pot, but what was it? Can you replay the one on the top left?
Top left?
Yeah, it was just like sometimes these smaller pots are pretty interesting. I just was just curious what the river action was. I think it might have just went check on the river, in which case it's not that interesting.
So small bet on the flop.
Check call, check, and then just showdown. Okay, yeah. I thought, because the only thing that would be interesting, I didn't see the river action, so I didn't know if he had decided to go for like a bigger bet with this hand. Typically, you're not gonna use a ton of big bets here on the Ace-Iris River as out of position, but thought it would have been interesting if he made the hero call with 4s of the heart.
And we had one here too. I think that's the one. Let's see. It was a squeeze, I assume. Yeah. Pretty big. Oh no, it was called 4 bets. Okay. 250, 850, and 2450. And I love that, by the way, some of these tables are show tables. I think that's so cool that you get to see if there is no showdown what actually fully happened.
That's some of the best stuff where you just like, you get to the river and you're just like, you can kind of guess, I expect him to show up with this type of hand, and then they show you something different.
He opened bigger than people usually would here. JSM looks like 3.5.
Yeah, I think, again, I haven't played with JSM before, but from what I've heard, I believe he uses like a lot of different preflop sizes than you might expect, or than you're used to. I mean, that's a way to give yourself edge, right? Is to just play sizes or ranges that your opponents are less familiar with. So maybe limping, blind versus blind, opening bigger, blind versus blind, those type of things.
And surely, if you're in this type of world championship, you have to put in some work to study this guy, right? Because he might be at your tables often. You can't afford to like be out of your comfort zone, I would assume.
No, exactly. Yeah, especially when you're playing a lot of tables. And again, there's no one at any of these tables who's just giving away money. Everyone's battling and knowing what they're doing. Mario's asking like, what makes Linus so special? I think like, well, we just kind of touched on like being able to play his A game, or maybe it's not always his A game, but we'll consider A game for anyone else, or at least maybe his B game is just so good it's better than most people's A game. But like for so long, right? It's very tough to play, even 2 to 4 tables for 2 to 3 hours of this level of competition and not get mental fatigue. Whereas obviously that guy can just play for 8 hours, and like I kind of said earlier, it seems like on hour 7 he's almost as good as he was on hour 2, which is very difficult. And then as you had mentioned, that he's also just seems to just like bluff catch very well in the very difficult spots, where your opponent just, when you get to the river, and we've all been in that spot where you're just thinking like, please check, please check, please check. and obviously he's not the type that is going to check in those spots if he doesn't have to, and then he puts you in that tough spot, and then when the roles are reversed, he's able to navigate and bluff catch well in those spots.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's not just like one of the best players in the world. He also has like supposedly, right, a very big bankroll behind him. So on paper, he should be one of the harder people to bluff. Somebody once told me the same thing about Stephen Chidwick in a PLO tournament. Somebody I know was like, I tried to bluff Stephen Chidwick once. I'm not gonna do it again. He just has so much money. He doesn't care. If he thinks he's right on the river, he's just gonna call you anyway. So
yeah. When you can make the right decision and not have money factor into it, it definitely helps. It's kind of like if you train in like GTO Lizard, a lot of times those spots are easy to make because they're not real chips.
yeah.
So if you're wrong, you just I was wrong. I'll fix it next time. But when someone shoves for 10K on the river, it's a lot more. There's a lot more pressure on making the right decision.
I mean, technically, you're not completely wrong very often because there is always that 1 or 2% that makes you right? We'll take
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Small wins.
Even a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then, right?
Exactly. Okay, here we got a spot with Chris Nguyen and Jason Gale betting small again here in the small blind. This looks like this was 3-bet pre-flop. No rake. Is there like or somewhat different ranges that you feel players are gonna have to study hard for this since there is no rake? Like you have more defense in the big blind, in the small blind. Sorry, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of in between like a regular cash game and a tournament because there's no ante.
Yeah.
So there's no rake, so you play wider, but there's no ante, so you don't play quite as wide. So the ranges will look somewhere between a typical, cash game strategy and then a tournament strategy, basically. So, but yeah, Jason Gale, like I believe he's been playing for a long time, as far as I'm aware, and he does likes to do these kind of things that again people aren't necessarily used to. So it's not very common you're going to see that small of a bet on this texture in a 3-bet pot, right? So when someone bets that small, it's going to force imposition to defend super wide, and then obviously have some raises because there's going to be a portion of your range that wants to build the pot more quickly, and then if your opponent is c-betting the small size, just naturally part of the strategy that combats that is to raise a bit more.
And he went for a check call on the turn here. Checks the river to Chris
small bet, raise, check call. The biggest brick in the deck you could the board ran out brick. Yeah, the only hand, obviously the only it's not I guess a super brick in the respect that a hand like Queen 9 now loses some overpairs, but like pretty insignificant portion. So yeah, we saw a raise with which kind of like a mergey raise. So he raised with bottom pair and then barreled the turn, and actually worked out well. He got called twice by a draw. But yeah, basically the purpose of this raise is the times Jassam just has say ace king, ace jack, ace 10, ace 5, or maybe even a hand like pocket 8s, pocket 7s. These hands he's put in a really awkward spot. And then when he barrels the turn for the size he chose, same thing kind of applies. He'll get, this is kind of a great example of what happened. So he'll get Jassam to fold a hand like pocket 7s, pocket 8s, maybe even pocket 10s, because imposition's bluffing region will contain a 10 a lot. So he'll get Jassam to fold a bunch of the hands that he loses to, while actually getting him to call some hands he beats, like this hand, like we saw. So a hand like Jack 10, maybe he calls the turn with just like Ace King High, Ace Queen of Hearts, or sorry, Ace Jack of Hearts, like those type of hands. So it's kind of it's called like a value bluff. So you basically turn a pair into a bluff against a portion of your opponent's range while still getting called by the the portion of range you still beat. So yeah, these are very fun spots to see when they work out just like that, right? He got his opponent to call twice with Jack High, and then he shows down and wins the pot.
I see someone in the chat is asking who's in the commentary booth. So I'm your host, Johan Merlo, aka Todd, and this is Ryan Risk with me from Poker with Risk, great content creator and coach. I have a question about the Jack 10 here. Would you have disliked a check jam on the turn from Jason Gale?
Typically, so in these spots when you jam, you want to be able to beat more of your opponent's or have more equity, I guess, versus your opponent's bet calling range. And a hand like Jack 10, and you also want to make sure it's not to say, so if he had Jack 10, he can definitely do some check jamming in this spot if he thinks his opponent's going to just in theory, and if he thinks his opponent's going to bet fold. But you also want to make sure that if you think of this spot, if he does like check call, and then the river is a card like an 8 or a king, and he's not playing this range appropriately, imposition is going to just like have, especially on an 8, where out of position is not really going to improve much on the 8 if they're jamming or fast playing or playing aggressively, we'll say, with all their Jack 10. So it's a combination of giving yourself some strong hands on the river, and then when you face a bet here, you have good equity to call, especially again if you have like relatively good implied odds when you hit on a king or an 8. Whereas when you jam, you're gonna get it in pretty bad when you do get called, and so unless your opponent's massively over bluffing, you can't go too crazy here with a hand that has like this level of equity against your opponent's range.
Thank you so much. Makes a lot of sense. Almost too much chance to someone like me that doesn't know nearly as much as you. We got a big hand here developing with your fellow coach, Absolute Top Up.
So is this a check? We'll have to. Do you know the pre-flop and flop action?
On the flop, I don't know if Absolute Top Up C bets. Oh no, wait.
Oh, it looks like. Oh yeah, it looks like it was multi-way on the flop.
Yeah, it was. I was only 17. Was there too. So did he flat pre? Yeah, we'll get to rewatch it after. Well, now we can see what else happens.
So it looked like flop check raise, and now turn ace. He's gonna check. This is again. I'm not. Was it Armin who check raised? We'll have to double check that because that'll obviously make a big influence on your turn decision on the turn like this. Definitely a very like polarizing turn. You're gonna expect to see if Armin had check raised, pretty big bets on this turn because say he check raised a hand like tens, jacks. He's gonna have to he's 2 streets out of position at this depth. He's gonna have to slow down.
So Absolute Top Up opened under gun. Yeah, that's because we had a player that wasn't active. So I think that's why it was a bit confusing. I thought they had been a call in early. So he opened under the gun and then called by CD9K, called in the big blinds. I was only 17. Then they check around small bets, re-raise, and re-raise again.
Okay.
That's unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
Like, first of all, we don't see too many 3-way pots, but now it's like, not only does it happen, there is a continuation bets. Oh no, sorry, he doesn't see bets. Button stabs, gets check raise, and then there's the check raise from the original raiser, Absolute Top Up.
Okay, yeah, check raise, and then I'm assuming imposition just calls here.
Yeah, CD9K calls.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I was only 17, just folds.
And then on the turn ace, check folds. Yeah, Armin's obviously gonna have a mixture of bluffs and value in this line, and then in this scenario, maybe lucky for him if he had a hand like jacks or tens because imposition had a set of deuces. So,
are you okay with the flat on the button with the deuces? Because I think the ranges that I study, I think you fold that, but maybe because the high rake.
Yeah, they're deeper and rake is 0. Yeah. So you're definitely gonna flat. You want to have a wider flatting range on the button, and so when you're gonna want to flat some of these small pairs because they play like reasonably well in position, and then obviously you need to protect that range by making sure that you're also calling some of your good hands. So you can't just because if your range here is just say like deuces through sevens and some suited connectors, then anytime the board comes like high cards, your range is just dead. So you got to make sure you have a mixture of good and bad hands in there.
Yeah, we got Tobias Duthweiler on the river here with a bet against Meunier Star. Seems like there wasn't much betting going on. Maybe one small bet on the flop by the look of things, by the size of the pot.
Yeah. Blind versus...
button against blind.
Okay, yeah. So check down to or small bet, check, bet. That's probably what happened, right?
Yeah. I would assume, yeah.
And so he's betting, we're betting a pretty decent size. So this is typically going to be, especially in this spot, it's kind of hard to value bet worse than an ace. But you can definitely value bet some queen X and stuff here. But you got to be careful because out of position is going to want to do a fairly good job of protecting their checking range here with both some ace-x and some hands that can check raise, because the 8 will open up some hands that are worth check raising the river, and then also 2 straights completed on the turn as well.
And we've got Chris doing an absolute top up. Looks like button against big blinds. If there was a 3-bet, that was a small 3-bet because there was only 1K, right?
Yeah, probably more likely there was
a C-bet, I guess.
Bet. Yeah, and he probably went for a bigger C-bet on that texture, which makes sense. Saying like a board like 7-6-3, you can definitely play some like medium sized bets on the flop.
This was multi-way.
Okay.
Tobias Dothweiler under the gun and then called button and big blind. So this spot keeps happening as well. Small bets, call.
Okay, that makes more sense. That's why the pot got bigger. Okay. Small bet multi-way definitely makes sense. Check, turn. And then, Chris kind of like, this is like close to, I mean, it's a multi-way spot, so you can't bet the turn as much, but this hand makes sense to check back just because you keep in your opponent's, we'll say, bluffs in the spot. Protect your range on some diamond and 7 and sort rivers, and then Armin goes for a medium-sized bet, which is basically going to be 2 pair straight for the most part. Maybe some king X of clubs holdings, but he's definitely. I would assume he's not value betting much thinner than that. And Chris has a pretty good, aside from the times he's river to king, this is going to make one of his best bluff catchers. Again, just the idea like. Flop top pair, has the ace. Just Armin's not really gonna be bluffing with any of the cards that that Chris holds.
Is that the type of hand you look at and you're like, I could talk about this one for an hour and just go through like everything?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to get too. Sometimes I just start, going down a wormhole of analysis on a hand. So
but that's a good thing.
That's a good thing. It can be, but you also, you have a wide range of viewers. I know there's definitely some people watching this who are just like, all right, man, that's enough. Move on to the next hand.
No, nobody's like that. We got a hand here between Tobias Dothweiler and Linus. Blind versus blinds.
Yeah, so these textures. So imposition is going to have a lot more 6x. I don't know. Again, I'm not 100% sure how the flop went, but Linus is going for a medium-sized bet, so he's not necessarily leveraging a like 6x advantage. This is going to be a more like looking to value bet some 10 and some potentially some 9x. Obviously bluffs as well.
I'll try and give it a rewatch real quick. Here.
So it was check, bet, call, and then turn 6, check, bet. Yeah, so he goes for just like the medium size here, which is, a lot of these times, a lot of these spots, flush over flush for Armin. Look like second nut flush versus third nut flush. So, but a lot of times these medium bets, a lot of the benefit at this level, again, obviously everyone's going to understand the bets, but you always want to think, if you were, say you're watching the stream and you're trying to get better, if you're in the out of position shoes and Linus bets half pot on that turn, what's your response, right? So say for you take the reins here. What are you going to do versus half pot there on the turn?
Yeah, I mean, already my brain is melting just watching like any one of these hands. Like these guys, they're
boat over boat.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Rough. Especially he has the 4 and the deuce. It's funny because, pretty bad river, 4 deuce, but not bad enough that you're not going all. Just bad in the sense that you no longer cooler a 4, which the EV comes from coolering. But hard to get a bigger cooler than that when you have a 4 and a deuce. So you can't lose to quads. You basically just lose to pocket 8s. Because it's not like under the gun can have 8-4. So you literally lose to one hand.
That's wild.
He's had a couple. He had another one that challenged like this where he had 6-5 on like 5-5 something against pocket 6s, and the river was a 6. So similar spot. So I mean, you play a lot of hands against the best people. When you get cooler, the money's going in because both people know how to play their value range.
And Linus just lost another one here with the cooler. I think he was ace king against kings again. He's had this quite a few times, actually.
Yeah, those positions you had asked earlier, like, is if it's ace king and kings, it always going in. These positions, yes, like
Yeah.
line is always 3-betting, in position's always 4-betting, and then ace king's basically always going to shove, especially in those positions.
Can have a rewatch real quick. 9K
What's my
raise.
favorite? I got asked in the chat. Favorite COD of all time? Gonna age myself, but the very first Call of Duty. Good chance if you're asking in the chat, you probably weren't playing that one because that one came out probably like 20 years ago.
Hey, it was on console, right?
PC. The first,
really?
I played on PC when I was like 14. That was like I played. So it's funny. One of the coaches I work with, Andrew Ivers, he actually was a professional Call of Duty player.
Okay,
so and I he transitioned from pro gaming to poker, and I was like his first coach, and then we started working together after that. But I joke with him because he's a pro poker player now. Used to be a COD player, and I played whatever that Call of Duty vanilla or whatever it was, and played in like a tournament where we won like $400, and I thought that was pretty cool as a 14-year-old, and that was like, that was about as big of a prize pool as you could win back then. So yeah, we'll say I was a very short stint as a pro COD player.
Yeah, a lot of gamers like rotated into poker at some point.
Yeah, because
in Warcraft 3, like Warcraft 3 is a pretty old game. That's the game I was the first professional at, and some of the old school players, they went into poker and became like very successful actually with that. One of them even final tabled one of the WSOP, but like super long ago.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I know like Doug Polk came from, like, he used to play StarCraft, like especially those RTS games.
He played Warcraft 3.
Oh, was it? Okay, yeah. But either like those games seem to transfer over quite well. You got to make a lot of decisions quickly.
Yeah, and it's a strategy game with incomplete information because you have the fog of war. So there are some similarities in that.
That's fair. I thought about that. So also looking this, so this is pretty fun. Linus versus, sorry, I don't, Duthweiler.
Tobias Duthweiler.
Yeah, they're playing blind versus blind. I believe this is a 3-bet pot, potentially a 4-bet pot. But you're seeing some very small bet from in position on the turn. Power of position. You can use these really small bets and just make out of position uncomfortable. You're gonna have to defend very wide versus that small bet. You're gonna have to make sure you have some good hands in this range so that when you get jammed on this river, you're not just bluff catching. You want to make it so in position can't just value bet everything that beats a 9 or maybe even anything that beats a 5. We'll say. So you got to make sure you have some good hands in your turn check call range, and then now we have a decision on the river. I have about just over half pot left. So Linus is going to have to call some ace highs, most likely in this spot. Just again, I'm not 100% sure what the pre-flop action was, which will dictate what his range looks like.
You're talking about the hand that was in top left, right?
Yep. The one we just looked at there, the 4 deuce deuce.
I will replay it. Yeah. So blind versus blind raise 3-bet, 4-bet, 20 to 50.
Okay. Yeah.
And call 4 deuce. That's quarter.
Call. And then so then definitely in this line, Linus is going to need to find some check calls with ace highs, some good ace highs, and then obviously on the turn he's going to want to check call some strong hands to allow for one to protect his check call range on the river, but also to allow in position to bluff when they floated the flop with potential bluffing hands themselves.
If you have ace queen here as Tobias Duthweiler, do you bluff?
I think ace queen's mainly going to show down on this run out.
Okay.
It's because it's a 4-bet pot, blind versus blind, so just ranges are a lot wider. So when it's like 4-bet, small bet this flop, then Duthweiler's going to have like king highs, queen highs, jack highs on this river. So those will be his like potential bluffs, and then he's going to value bet accordingly as well. And then he's going to have aces. In these spots, you're actually supposed to have even hands like kings and ace king. He's not going to bluff ace king, but yeah, that's what his range should look like in theory.
All right. We've got the hands right here. Okay, it's just went to showdown king jack in position for CD9K, and down there
This looks like it was a single raise pot. It looked maybe Armin flatted the button and called a flop bet.
Your absolute top up's name is Armin?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Should stick to screen names, I guess.
And over bets.
Yeah, interesting to, again, I don't know what.
Whoa!
So you just had a bluff. That will be like, it's interesting to see an overbet there if it was like if it was how I thought it was, where it was single raise call. So yeah, raise call.
Small bet call.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to say you're not allowed to play big bets here, but if Armin's constructing his range accordingly, you know, Armin should have ace queen, king jack, even have like pocket sevens, and you know, at least a hand like ace 10. So like, that's not to say he can't play this big bet, but I just wouldn't have expected a big bet on this turn as out of position. Especially if he's playing a one size strat, but maybe he's playing two sizes, and you know, this hand, if you're gonna play a big bet, this hand makes a lot of sense to use.
Is absolute top up a very young player?
Yeah, I think he's 22.
Oh my god.
21, 22. Yeah, so
there is something about the young crushers, right? They're very inspiring, I think, to any poker player.
Oh, they have infinite energy, so that helps.
Yeah, because like you think about their age and you think of like what you were doing to when you were 22. You know, I was just spamming video games personally, and then you're like, this guy is playing for like tens of thousands.
Yeah, I made the mistake. I got into poker like I've only been playing full time for like 8 years now, something like that. But I did get into poker when I was in university and like, you know, made some money just playing small stakes. I wish, especially because the games were much easier back then, I wish I had gone a bit harder into poker at that point.
Yeah. I like when you post the hands and like the graphs and stuff on your socials. Like some of those hands I would look at and I would be like, how did you call there?
Yeah, I have a pretty interesting one that I'm planning. I'm planning to potentially make it tomorrow. A heads up hand I played recently that I thought was pretty fun. So hopefully I get around to it. You know, it's tough. The more, you know, doing this commentary, running a CFP, sometimes you it's hard to find the time, especially because at the end of the day, a lot of times when you watch a challenge like this, a lot of times after you're done watching these hands, you just want to go play yourself because you're like, oh, that was fun. Like these spots are just interesting. Here's a big pot versus absolute top up and Deathweiler on the river. We're seeing like 2/3 pot and a jam.
And that is
pretty miserable spot for, you know, whenever you bet and get jammed on, unless you have the nuts, it's not fun.
Yeah.
So
that's a show table. Ace queen. Did you see?
You bluffed with ace queen.
Yeah. So I told you, like sometimes on these runouts, like I've seen it before.
Who's jamming ace queen here in the chat? Like not a combo you would expect to see.
Okay, let's rewatch. So it was open Linus 3-bet absolute top up, cold 4-bet Topaz Deathweiler, kind of small 2300 call. And then he bet really big, half pots. I guess they're deep, right? That's why.
Yeah.
Call. 6 of spades. He checks. Check back. Do you think that was the plan the whole time on like most rivers for Topaz Deathweiler? Already on the turn?
This type of play doesn't seem premeditated.
Yeah.
Like, this seems like it could be a spot where he thought that this bet size, again, I'm not saying it is from Armin, but I'm assuming when you make a play like this, I guess benefit of this play is he blocks a hand like aces and pocket queens. So these are going to be some of the better hands that Armin has. And sorry, the pre-flop action was Armin 3-bet Linus and then Deathweiler cold 4-bet, right?
Yeah.
So at this stack depth, I would assume, you know, like in position might have actually an advantage over some of the like suited connectors and pairs, or at least close enough. So yeah, it's just a pretty miserable spot for all the times when Armin, you know, calls flop, bets this river. Most of the time, I'm going to assume he has some sort of one pair holding. So he's going to have, you know, pocket jacks, maybe pocket queens himself, or, you know, a 10 or whatever. So yeah, pretty miserable spot for that. If you haven't, and part of the reason you want to make sure that you're not protecting this bet, right? Because if you're betting this size and all you have is pocket jacks or pocket queens at best, or even say pocket aces at best, because it's not like pocket aces is loving getting jammed on here either, right? So yeah, pretty miserable spot for whatever Armin had, and pretty sick play from Duthweiler.
Yeah, once I see a play like this from Tobias Duthweiler, I always feel like he's bound to get paid because now he's really shown that he can go for it with the very big bets.
Yeah. Finding the 3x jam. It's like almost a 200 big blind jam on the river, right? So
yeah, that was big. We got a 4-bet pot here. Blind versus blind. Tobias Duthweiler in the small blind. Meunier Star in the big blinds. And we head to a 9-5-5 flop. That's quarter.
A very, very good board for the 4-better in the sense that all of their overpairs are nutted on this board. It's very difficult for imposition to have a 5, and like especially enough for it to matter. This turn is gonna obviously neutralize some EV, and just like imposition might have we'll have an advantage definitely on some 7-8 pocket 6s type holdings, and they're also going to pick up some equity with some pairs that have now a gut shot or potentially backdoor flush draw. And they're playing just over 1 SPR, I think.
Yeah. Meunier Star has 9k and there's almost 7k in the pot.
So we see a check.
Is that standard, do you think?
Again, these spots are going to be, it's not like Duthweiler can bet his whole range on this turn. And then so therefore he needs to develop a checking range, and that's going to be hands that check fold, hands that check call, and hands that check raise. So we've seen him go crazy with ace queen before. I don't think he would check. I mean, there actually could be some hit spots here. Use a hand like ace queen if you have the right blockers against your opponent's bet call range. If you think your opponent's going to bet fold too much, then just having like a good ace high can actually be reasonable, because when you get called by your opponent's pairs, you still have like 2 clean overs. And then sometimes they'll bet call a hand like ace 10 of spades and you'll actually be ahead. So
Peter Knop opens under the gun, and Linus 3-bet in the hijack, and Peter Knop called. Is that, do you feel like is that one of these here ranges to read, like medium pairs and stuff like that, or do you think it's still very up in the air?
Yeah, I mean, you can remove aces from this range. Is this a pot size? No, this is one. It's like, yeah, just over. It's like 40%. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, so he's not really ever gonna have aces here or kings, but he's definitely gonna have like pocket queens, pocket jacks, ace queen suited, a bunch of suited hands. So it's going to be a mixture. It's going to be capped in that he won't have aces and kings in most scenarios. We'll say 100 big blinds deep at least. He's never really going to have those hands. But he's definitely going to have some strong hands. And then, but, another spot here where if you just think of what it looks like when you're in the spot, most of his range now, when he faces the double barrel on this turn, is in a pretty miserable bluff catching spot. Like, even if you have a hand as strong as pocket 10s here, it's not fun because you still have another street to play. Linus has 10s plus in range. So here we go. He did have the 10s, and he also somewhat interesting that we saw Linus double barrel the turn with ace king. Definitely you're going to want to use some of these hands. It's actually a good hand to use when you have the king of diamonds, because you unblock your opponent from having the ace of diamonds, so he can check all the turn with hands like ace queen of diamonds, ace jack of diamonds, ace 10 of diamonds. And similar to that spot we saw with the 6-8, hands like 10s, especially 10s, 9s, 8s, these hands, 7s, are all kind of in different bluff catchers. So you'll get out of position to fold some of those hands, but call you with some of the draws that you dominate.
And there's always a lot of talk about, like ranges and, what you should do in theory there in this spot and stuff, but how much do you think at this point the familiarity between these players comes into play, and image in particular? Because Linus has shown also that he can go for it on a lot of rivers, and what happened last night was that he started getting called, and a whole bunch of time, even though he was the one also doing great calls on the river, he was getting called down when he was bluffing. And after that, I noticed he started shutting down a little bit more. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's just, random. I just ended up seeing this, and these were clear spots where he should stop, or like where he should give up on the river, because I'm not good enough to understand that. But do you think here maybe he realizes that people know he's very aggressive and is maybe a bit more reluctant to go for these bluffs? Or do you think like here with the hands, it's also maybe okay to stop?
Yeah, I mean, when people are as aggressive as these players, you're going to see so much betting in general that like you can kind of go on runs where you just bet every time, and then you can go on runs where you don't. And I think also Linus has probably played a lot against most of these opponents, and he's always been hyper aggressive. So pretty likely he's just hit like. I don't think you're going to get Linus to shy away from running big bluffs from just looking at the hand histories, having talked to people play regularly against him, those type of things. Like the guy's just going to put you in tough spots, and I don't think he's going to shy away just because he's been called a few times. So yeah, more likely just variance is what I would assume. Looks like we have a reasonably sized pot bottom table here with absolute top up for CD. Flush complete river and hefty bet on the river. Non-over bet, but big bet.
And we're
And
extremely
super
deep
too.
Yeah,
So check jam is in the cards.
Oh my god.
Check raise this size is also in the cards.
15K.
And a fold. And
that's a show table. Oh yeah, he had it.
Nut flush. So I was gonna say, like, at that depth, check jam. I've seen CDK make some large jams in some of these spots. So if basically in this spot, what you would determine is, are you gonna play multiple raise sizes here? So on the river, are you gonna play some non all-in raises and some jams? And when he has the nut flush, he's at least determining he definitely wants to play some non all-in. I'm assuming he might play some all-in as well. And what he might be doing here is when he has the 9 of clubs in hand, he's going to check raise non all-in just because he blocks some of Armin's best bluff catches, a hand like maybe 9x of clubs himself or pocket nines of the club. So he decided that could be part of his decision process to not go all in with this hand. And if he had a hand like, say, ace 8 of clubs, he would just always go all in, kind of thing, because then he unblocks Armin's sets with a club, 9x of clubs, and then even unblocks like straights that have a club, so a hand like queen 10 with a club.
So what does this hand look like from absolute top ups position then on the river?
Pretty miserable. You're gonna need to, obviously, if he has a flush, he's going to determine if he thinks his flush is worth jamming or calling. He's not going to fold the flush, obviously, in this line. So if he bets the flush and gets the raise the side, he's going to call. And then he's going to be, because this raise is basically a flush or better, then anything that's not a flush is just a bluff catcher at that point. So then he just needs to pick the combos he thinks is best. Like straights are going to be reasonably decent bluff catches just because it's going to be difficult. If you have queen 10, it's kind of hard for your opponent to be, bluffing with a bare queen or 10. But obviously having a club with those hands is pretty good because you block a flush. If you value bet a hand like ace king with the ace of clubs, it's actually probably not a great bluff catcher versus the size, just because out of position is probably supposed to bluff themselves with the ace of clubs, right? So it's one of those spots where you think, I block the nuts, but you also might block a lot of your opponent's bluffs. So again, you got to be careful, just not.
Oh my god!
When I have a pair and block the nuts, I call.
Oh my goodness!
Oh, that's a big pot.
$54,000 here. I was thinking the whole time, surely like they won't call and stuff, but no, they went for it, and actually immediate sit outs, and another player was in the list and took his spot. So we can watch this. That was absolutely wild. So let's see. Chris Wynn opens.
It's fun to make sets.
Cut off.
So bet a raise.
Yeah. And they're extremely deep. No, he re-raised, right?
Oh, he threw it at the flop?
Yeah, he bet small, got re-raised, and then re-raised again.
Okay.
1800. Call. 10 on the turn. Check. So Peter Knop really trapping on the turn. Bet pretty much. Yeah. Oh, he's slight over bet, yeah. And he just calls.
So River 10 is interesting because it's a pretty big brick. Like, so it's good for imposition because now you don't lose to hands like Queen Deuce, Queen 6, and then maybe even a hand like 6-2 suited in this rake environment. So the 10 is about as bricky as you can get, unless your opponent has like check raise queen 10 and runner to boat. So it's actually like one of those spots where you think in position like, oh, it's actually a pretty good spot to go, we'll say thin for value. Just because I beat all the queen X, I beat all flop 2 pair now as well, so I basically only lose to a set. My opponent's not going to have pocket queens because they would 3-bet that pre-flop, so not a ton of hands you lose to. He bets and faces a jam, and obviously the flip side of this is out of position can use some of those holdings as a bluff themselves. So if he has a hand like queen deuce, queen 6, he can actually decide to jam himself as like a bluff against your opponent's kings type holdings. But again, neither opponent's really gonna have a 10, so it's a pretty annoying spot for in position when they take this line.
Are you surprised at all that Chris Nguyen raised again on the flop? I feel like whenever I check theory there, you're just calling against a lot of check raises, no? Or maybe it's because they're
Yeah, it's gonna depend on the texture. So on a texture like this, out of position doesn't have like they don't have offsuit 2 pair, they don't have pocket queens, and then they'll have like hands like ace queen, queen X in general, and so probably aces is going to trap a lot, or well, not say just a lot of your range will continue by calling. But if when you construct a flop 3-betting range, this like basically the overpair directly above flop top pair will be one of the most commonly used hands. So in this scenario, he only has kings and aces that are overpairs on flop. So calling aces and raising kings sometimes could be his approach, and then he would include some bluffing candidates, which would be like some maybe a hand like ace 3, ace 4, ace 5 potentially, or a hand like king 3, king 4, king 5, and also actually some hands like ace deuce makes sense as well, blocking sets and having equity versus the queen X region. And the benefit of 3-betting the flop with those type of hands is if you have say a hand like ace deuce, your opponent's going to check raise the flop, or even a hand like say like king 6 or ace 6. Your opponent's going to check raise the flop with some good hands, and then obviously sets, which you'll block. But they'll also check raise some hands that are gut shots, or the hands we talked about. Maybe they check raise a hand like king 5. So when you 3-bet the flop, you just deny equity to that portion of their range.
And then from Peter Knop, it feels like he played this perfect, pretty much, right? Like kind of trapped the whole way, kept the bluffs in.
Yeah, I think like a hand like 6s at this depth is going to mix versus the flop 3-bet. So if you're playing a flop 4-bet range, some people wouldn't, but if he's playing a flop 4-bet range, 6s would definitely be in that range, and then he would use some bluffs as well. But once he gets this turn, I think it's reasonable to play again. Turn would be a mix as well. You could sometimes check raise turn, or you could just play mainly calls. And then on the river you face a bet and you lose to basically one hand. Like in position doesn't have 10s because they wouldn't 3-bet the flop with 10s. They don't have queen 10 because they wouldn't 3-bet the flop with queen 10. So basically you only lose to pocket queens. So you basically have the second nuts for this situation. So pretty reasonable jam.
Yeah, one of the bigger pots that we've seen so far. With it as well, rigged deck with the overbet jam here against the buddy
So
absolute
like
top up.
2x pot jam on 5 deuce 3. Again,
Button against small blind.
I'm not sure if this was single raise pot bet jam.
And he goes for the call.
Straight versus ace queen high.
I mean, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
What just went down?
Pre-flop action is going to dictate what. I'm assuming this was based on the showdown. Raise, 3-bet, call, bet. Maybe bet twice, check call, or maybe just bet, check call.
So raise 3 bets and call, yeah. And then
bet flop.
half pots, call.
Call. Check call. Oh, check. Okay. And then river check. Face jam. Yeah, so basically in this line, Armin's going to have to call some, based on what his range looks like, he's going to have some traps here. We'll say like a trap would be, he doesn't really have a ton of boats, but maybe like aces, maybe ace 4 himself. And then he will have hands like ace deuce, ace 3, and pocket 5s. So he'll have some boats that can definitely trap the river. But then beyond that, he wants to call some hands that just beat imposition's bluffs. And basically, what he probably determined is ace is a good card to have because you block. I'm assuming he called, like, if he's taking enough time, he's gonna be able to think, okay, like, I want to block as much of the ace deuce and ace three region as I can. So having the, if you look at the specific suits here, having the ace of spades is very good in his hand. So I'm not sure if he had the ace of spades, but ace of spades seems very good because you block ace deuce suited and ace three suited. So if he had ace of spades, queen of diamonds on the river, it makes like a pretty reasonable hero call. So I'm not sure which suits he had exactly when he called.
He had ace of clubs and queen of diamonds.
Okay, so ace of clubs still blocks like ace three suited, and obviously ace four suited. So like perfect bluff catcher probably for Armin would have been ace of spades, queen of diamonds. But this type of hand makes sense as well.
And we see Linus in a hand with Chris win here. I'm guessing this was a 3-bet pot, maybe even 4-bet.
Yeah. Flush complete turn.
And a small bet on with the flush completing. Is that the main line that you will see? Because we've seen a lot of these on like scare cards on the turn, or like bad cards maybe for one of the players. People have been betting smaller usually.
Especially as the Envision player on this type of flush complete. If the board was more dynamic and SPR was smaller, so say it was like Queen 8-7 or Queen 8-9 with two hearts, where there's like straight draws as well, then you might see some jams from even out of position in certain spots. And then in position is still mainly going to use small bets in these spots. It's just like how you leverage position for these scenarios. But yeah, I think usually you want to use a lot of small bets because you don't really need to put in money quickly with your best hands, and this just allows you to put the out of position player in a lot more uncomfortable spot where they have to defend wider with worse hands. Micah asked, is there a clear favorite on these tables? How big of an edge do you think? I think it's pretty difficult to assume anyone has again, Linus's results and just being the best player for so long, you'd kind of have to default to saying he is an edge. I know there's probably people competing in this challenge that hate to hear like Linus being said all the time, but going with just the history of the high stakes games, kind of how he has to be the front runner. Beyond that, like the fact that it's no rake, which is a really cool promotion, like a lot of these guys wouldn't just want to sit out here battling hours on end if even in a low rake environment. So just providing them with this platform where they can just play zero rake for hours on end, it allows us spectators just watch the best players compete. So that's really cool. So I would assume edges are super small. So variance is definitely going to play a pretty big part in this, especially like as stacks get deeper. When you're playing deep stack poker against the best players in the world, variance is going to be huge because coolers are going to just be that much more important. Because when you're if you're 300 big blinds deep and it's like nuts into second, that's like that's just going to really affect the results.
And that at the end of the challenge, the winner will be who has not the highest profit but the highest dollar EV actually.
Yeah, exactly. So accounting for those like unfortunate all-ins and stuff. There was actually a pot the other day we were analyzing where Linus called the turn with a set and then donk jammed the river when he improved to a boat. And I think like definitely could just be super standard portion of his game, but also we were like joking that maybe he was calling to jam the river to ensure instead of just the EV portion of his line went up, that his whole like he jams the river and now there's not the say he had 70% equity on the turn, he doesn't just get 70% of the EV.
Yeah.
He jams the river and when he gets called he gets 100% EV, right? So that'd be some next level gaming the system if that's what he was doing.
He'd be capable of it, sure.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anyone out there that knows how to win a game, it's him.
And we got a pot. Speaking of Linus, him and Chris win right now. Looks like under the gun against big blind, and we're on the river with 6,000 already in the pot.
Yeah, so we're playing about pot left on the river.
And if there were ever any doubts of what he was going to do, there it is.
Yeah, I mean, so when he jams here, you can kind of assume, and yeah, someone was asking, is there any recreational players at the tables? I'm pretty sure everyone at these tables is some level of a professional, like typically some of the best professionals out there. But yeah, in this scenario, I would assume the minimum jam candidate in this spot is like king queen at least. Maybe king 10, but that's again for these positions this run. I mean king 10 could definitely make it in there. It's like 1-1, but I'm not exactly sure how this pot got so big. So if it was a 3-bet pot, it changes things.
We can rewatch immediately after. I feel like I've seen hands like king jack doing this here too, just because these guys are like so deep inside each other's heads at this point, like with the bluffs and all that stuff, that they're trying to get max value.
Yeah, like definitely if you're a top-notch player, you know what out of position's supposed to call versus this. And if you've ever worked with like a software like GTO Wizard, you can like node lock stuff. So if Linus would assume Chris is calling the spot too wide, then obviously he can jam wider, right? So if he knows what the defense frequency is supposed to look like, but he assumes that Chris is going to hero call wider than he's supposed to, then you can just start jamming, wider for value.
So this was raise under the gun defense. Half pot bet that gets check raised. He turns the king, check.
Okay.
And then Linus bets big. Call.
Jammer. Yeah, okay, this makes a lot more sense. It's actually interesting that like in this line, it makes more sense to jam a 1-pair holding than if Linus had just gone bet, jam. Because in this line, when it goes check, raise, check, Chris has a lot less king X in this line, and Linus is holding the king of clubs, so Chris can't even be check raising a hand like king jack or king queen of clubs that he loses to. So if Chris doesn't have a set, then Linus is always improved to the best hand on the king. Obviously, that's Chris can have some hands like king jack with a club, king queen with a club at a frequency, but we'll kind of assume if Chris doesn't have a set on the flop, then Linus is the best hand. And then for the same reason, unless Chris is improved to exactly like ace jack of clubs, then same idea, he kind of has the nuts on the river. So it's I feel like a thinner jam, but as you had kind of alluded to, maybe Linus assumes that he'll get hero called too often with a hand like ace 10, maybe a hand like even jack 10 type holdings.
So this is the type of play you're able to look at and immediately be like, yeah, this is profitable because of X and Y.
Yeah, you could look at the spot, see what type of hands out of position is supposed to call, and then determine, do you think they're calling less or more? And if you think they call less, then you'd want to bluff more, but jam less for value. And if you think they're calling more than they're supposed to, then you want to bluff less and jam more for value.
Do you think that it's easy also to think of the best bluff catchers in those spots, or is that one of the hardest things? Because as someone who's a lot less experienced than the actual good players, for me, that's probably one of the things where like I have no idea what's the single good bluff catcher here.
Yeah, I mean a king. If you have a king, good bluff catcher because Linus won't bluff with a king, right? But yeah, it's a pretty miserable. Like this is one of the worst turns for out of position because they just don't check raise much king X, and under the gun has a fair amount of king X in their range. So yeah, when you check raise here and face the king, it's kind of just like what that stems from is probably when a turn is very bad for you, you want to increase your checking frequency in general, and so therefore you should just check more of your hands that beat a hand like. So you got to make sure that you're checking more with a hand that beats king 9 of clubs, right? And that'll help a little bit because you'll just get to the river with stronger hands that are able to defend against the river all in.
Makes a lot of sense, yes. See here we've got a raise and a call, and some of the tables had a few people sit out.
Yeah, it looks like Absolute Top Up might have ended his session.
You talk to him daily usually?
Yeah, so like there's me, him, and 3 other coaches that work in our CFP. So yeah, we're always, especially now this challenge is going on, he's always like reporting in with how his session went, showing us interesting hands he's played. So some of the like I really enjoyed when Galfon had his like heads up challenge he played, especially the first one against Vinavidi. I think that was like some pretty cool content. This would be up there with the like it's informative and still engaging. Obviously it's a bit more niche, I think, for who's gonna really get into it, right? You're not gonna, if you're kind of a very casual cash game player, this is maybe not the most like engaging content because it's, you know, the best players in the world playing very quick. It's sometimes hard to follow the action. But I think for anyone who's like goal is like they want content that's entertaining and informative, this is like some of the best content you can find because you literally just get to sit and watch the best players battle it out and go through that. So that was a pretty big bluff by CDK there.
Can we watch that?
So raise, call, check.
Small bet. Re-raise.
And raise with ace 5. I mean, if you're going to raise ace 5 with the spade and get this river, it's about as good of a bluffing spot as you're going to get. Wow. You unblock all of your opponent's 10x, 8x, that will bet call, and then fold this river. You have the ace of spades. So
9-3 suited, though?
I mean, again, in this rake environment, you're just going to defend very wide in the big blind. So you're going to defend a lot of suited hands, and I mean, that's why you have to be a bit more careful as in position when you bluff in some of these runouts, because out of position will just have a lot more flushes because they're just going to defend way more suited hands. But obviously, if Chris had bet the turn with a hand that's like queen 3 of spades and gets raised, he's going to just have to fold that. So that's part of the benefit of raising a hand like ace 5 is when you have the ace of spades. If Chris has bet with the ace of spades, he's always going to continue versus the raise. But if he has like an unpaired non-draw flush hand, he's going to have to just fold. So the raise on the turn is going to be difficult for a lot of people to find. But having made the raise and getting this river, it's a reasonable spot to shove and hope your opponent has a river to flush.
Yeah, this is the type of play that I look at and I'm like, yeah, I'll never do either of this plays. Like, this is just too advanced for me.
The good thing is for people watching, you don't typically need to make these level of plays to make money in poker. If you're playing in these lineups in this challenge, you will. But against the average opponent, this is not a necessary. You know, these are the spots that people think are cool and they aspire to do.
Yeah.
But this is not necessary for 99% of the poker playing population.
You reckon if anyone joined these games and played pretty tight, they just get picked apart?
Yeah, especially everyone would also be playing so wide that, I mean, the benefit is they'd lose less to rake themselves, obviously, but they would just get pushed over because they'd be folding to 3-bets too much. They'd have their blinds stolen way too wide. Like, yeah, pretty easy to exploit that person. Yeah, Armin's done a good job just like looking at no rake sims and I mean, probably not surprising for any top level poker player.
Yeah.
He's got a really good memory in just that he's able to look at stuff and just visualize it in game later, like sims, ranges, those type of things. So definitely helps in these scenarios where accuracy is going to go a long way.
One of those young geniuses, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean.
And then we had a hand here just a second ago with was Linus. Here we watch. He opens. Oh, that was not the one. You saw that hand, right? Was it? It wasn't this one, was it?
I didn't see it.
Oh, maybe this was it. Oh, that was the hand before. No. Yeah. Okay. I've lost track of it. Yeah, let's watch.
Was it a bet?
Yeah, I was trying to see that, but somehow it escaped me. It's okay. We got a lot of hands going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's the hard part for me because I have to look at all the tables and then I'm trying to pay attention as much as possible to everything you're saying at the same time. Like, don't miss too much action, but it's fun. It's fun for sure.
You can probably swap out the one table on the left because they're sitting out.
Yeah, but like then for like the scene switching, because I'm showing 2 tables, then it becomes straight.
Oh, I see. So gotcha. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
Basically, the way I do it is like I show the 2 tables side by side on each scene.
Yeah, makes sense.
We got like a big pot brewing here. Munestar and CD9K.
So very small, 10% flop bet. That's probably, I'm assuming this was 3-bet, big blind button, and 10% flop. So going along with the small bet size, it wouldn't be surprising to see another small bet on this turn. Like, there's not a ton of reason to go big here. You can okay. There's two camps here. You could play big and polarize, but the thing is, if you go big, your opponent can just basically start defending ace x and 10x. So you typically, if you go small, you're going to force in position to defend wider than that. So our mean, a lot of our means growth. So again, we've only been working together for probably about maybe, I guess maybe closing on 2 years. Hard to keep track of time with, all the COVID, and I have a son now who's 3.5. Everything's kind of a blur over the past 4 years, but say the last 2 years at least. I actually met him in Texas at the lodge. We were both there for like a poker tournament, and mutual friends. I met him there. We started talking. It was funny watching. He's one of the best cash game players in the world, but he was playing some tournaments there and was like so lost because he had, young kid, never really. I remember going through that myself. If you come from cash games and play tournaments for the first time, you kind of know like everyone's doing stuff that seems bad, but you don't really know what to do to to like counter it because you're just so new to that format. So yeah, he made some mistakes, like definitely, but I knew, you could tell he played some cash games while he was there, did very well. But yeah, so he kind of learned on his own, which was kind of nice because the guys I studied with, the other 3 coaches, we had all kind of come up together. So our strategies were basically identical. Like, we all study together. We look for, strategies we can kind of all implement. When we brought him on, he had kind of come up on his own, so he had kind of formulated his own strategy. So it's been nice working with him because we've kind of worked together to like, show each other, oh, maybe you can improve in this spot by, simplifying this, or maybe you could improve in this spot by playing a bit more complex strategy, like those type of things. And so he, just came up on his own, played a lot. He loves just like looking at the sims, trying to just play as close to GTO as he can in most spots. And we've just worked together through that, just like kind of complementing each other's games.
And how come cash game players sometimes play tournaments? Is it like because they see like potential good value? They know like if they have some run good, they could do well, or is it for like variety, like to change it up a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Okay. Like it's like for me personally, I've played a bit of tournaments over the past like 2 years. Won like a online event for a ring, which is it's also fun. Like as a cash game player, you never win any hardware, right? So like I won a ring, won a couple scoop trophies, like just some things that like, hey, look, like this is real. Like I actually can win stuff, kind of thing, right? So it's just fun to like, if you've ever grown up competing and stuff, tournaments are a nice change to give yourself a chance to like win something, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, also on top of that, there's just EV to be had in those structures because a lot of recreational players love tournaments, and it makes sense. Like, for a lot of recreational players, the idea of buying in for $500 and walking away with $100,000 or whatever is pretty fun.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm actually going to Vegas next week for that, so I'll be playing some tournaments next week. Some live tournaments that I haven't done in a long time, so that'll be fun.
When you met him, was he playing the same stakes as he is now, or did he? What was he playing? Do you remember?
Yeah, like he's definitely been playing higher stakes more consistently lately, but I'm pretty sure once I start, he was at the very minimum playing like 2K and L pretty regularly at that point. Probably since we've like worked together, he's playing more 5K plus. But he was always like, as long as we've been working together, he's been playing pretty high stakes.
And you say you're going to Vegas to play some tournaments, but I know you mainly as the guy that does really nice breakdowns for cash. So is there like a preference for you in terms of what you enjoy more, or you'll happily go back and forth?
I think like what you kind of touched on before, like the idea of like just adding some variety is fun. Like I'll probably play some live cash while I'm there as well, which is again even like a way of mixing it up a little bit. But playing the live tournaments is a nice like change of pace. So definitely, in my career, 99% of it has been cash games, but I still enjoy tournaments and I've had success. The first ever live tournament I ever was it first? I might be misremembering. Maybe it was like a third tournament. I final tabled, and I was like, oh, these seem kind of easy. But definitely just ran pretty hot that first one.
Yeah. And then I guess if you're a cash player, also you bust from a tournament, it's almost like, you know, you're home immediately because you can just kind of get a seat pretty quickly into cash. Whereas the opposite, usually if you're a tournament player, I feel like you're going to have a harder time going into cash than the opposite. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, typically when tournament players play cash, the thing they struggle with is just like they always want to play so wide, right? Like if we're looking at this environment, this is very good for a tournament player because they'd be used to playing these super wide ranges in all spots. But if you're playing in any raked game, you're going to need to be a bit more disciplined with your unless you can assume some massive edge that can make up for rake, you're going to need to typically play tighter. Looks like so again, it's pretty interesting. Just like these small pots are fun, but like looks like blind versus blind, min bet on ace 9-4. So very small bet. This is, if you've played poker for a while, this is funny to think back. Back in the days, it was like ace 9-4. Ooh, I gotta bet big because like there's 3 diamonds. I gotta protect. I don't want another diamond to come. You've gone pretty far. Most people have gone the opposite, and now it's like very small bet because of, you know, the fact that you don't want to. The bigger you bet, the more your opponent can fold, and if you let them fold a lot, then they can just rely on their best hands.
Isn't it similar with like the button opening size in cash? Like it used to be smaller and now it's bigger?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the standard right now is typically about 2.5 times the big blind.
Yeah.
Whereas at one point it was 3x was pretty standard. At other points it was like 2x. So
yeah, I just remember seeing 2x a bunch, and then now I see the exact opposite. Like button is where you open the biggest nowadays.
Yeah, it's basically you're trying to like you're not going to get 3-bet out of position, which is the like if you face a 3-bet and you're in position, it's just better for your range, right? So basically when you're opening the button, you're guaranteeing you're going to play the pot in position. And when you're playing in position, typically you want to play as big a pots as possible. Obviously within reason, so you don't just like open 10x, but like you're finding that balance between want to play slightly bigger pots, want to leverage, you know, play bigger pots in position, want to give my opponent worse prices on their defense. Do me or Armin have desires to compete in high stakes tournaments like Tritons? I've seen very bad. We've definitely discussed, like I've talked about going and competing in, you know, the tournaments in Vegas. We've discussed the Triton events and stuff like that. I mean, again, I never close the door on anything, so yeah, there's always opportunities. Obviously the flip side of it is we have spent the vast majority of our time studying cash games, so you know, tournament structure isn't necessarily our forte. So yeah, it's kind of just like it's been in our minds, but we haven't really ever put much like effort into it, I guess. The Linus hand was pretty interesting. The 8-6, it happened like 2 hands ago on that ace 9-9. I think Linus just had 8-6 off and bluffed the river.
Which table was it?
Sorry, it was I think it's the right table you're showing right now.
This one?
Yeah, I believe so.
Let's see.
If you go back to the ace high mono, so it was ace 9-4, I think, with 3 diamonds, maybe one more hand before.
Nope.
It was blind versus blind. So
that's the one?
Yeah, sorry, this one. Yeah, so I didn't see. So I think it was min bet flop, and then Linus half potted the turn, faced the call. So I'm just curious what size he chose on river. So half pot call 5, and he goes for
2.4 or 2400.
Sorry, it's hard to make out the numbers. Is that an overbet?
Yeah, 2400. Yeah.
Okay, so into 18.
Yeah, 1.5, 150% of the pot.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so again, like these are just the difficult spots he's gonna put you in, right? Just has 8 high, knows he wants to bluff, knows he's gonna, you know, gonna have big bets on this river for sure. And just these are, you know, when you're playing blind versus blind spots, this is how you make your opponent's life miserable, is just having value in bluffs and lines like this.
How does the fact that they play on a show table affect the action here, perhaps, do you think?
Sometimes it can help your bluffing, because your opponent's like kind of got that. So part of the reason you call is for information in some scenarios, right? Like especially if you're playing against a weaker opponent early in a session, there's some value in like calling to see their hand if you're going to use that information better than them. Obviously, in these lineups, it's not like you can really exploit these guys too much because they're all very good players. But yeah, if you're bluffing in these spots, it could help your bluffs because your opponent's like, well, if I fold, I get to see anyways. So it could hurt your value and could help your bluffs. So maybe bluffing a bit more in some spots goes up in EV a little bit.
But then all alike, if you're thinking of bluff catching, then you know that maybe there is more bluffs because of it. So it's maybe it becomes about recognizing who might be doing this more.
Yeah. I mean, it's like poker's always a leveling game, right? So which level are you on, basically?
Yeah.
And that's why you have everyone's in different schools where some people are they just think about their game. They're not too concerned with other people's games, whereas other people kind of base their game entirely around their opponent's strategy, right? So you kind of just get a mixed bag.
Yeah, we got some hands developing. We got a
multi-way pot.
Yeah, multi-way.
Yeah. And again, this will happen more in this rake environment just because small blind's going to have... That's probably one of the biggest differences you'll know is like in a lot of high rake environments, the small blind is going to simplify to just like 3-bet or fold. Whereas in these lower rake environments, you need to call more hands from the small blind. So that inherently will just increase the likelihood of multi-way pots because the blinds will both call at the highest frequency. Pretty interesting spot here to use a big bet just because of the texture, the multi-way nature. Small blind is going to need to be pretty careful in these spots just based on what their range looks like against 2 ranges out of position. Very dynamic board too. So it's not like a huge bet, but it's not a small bet. So, it's very difficult to bet a hand on this turn that's going to love a river. Here's a prime example. If you bet the turn with, a hand as strong as ace jack, there's a lot of rivers like this that aren't great for that, right?
Yeah.
So,
betting 10% here? Is that something you would expect or approve
yeah,
of?
I mean, yeah, this makes sense. Like, you could play a one size small here, or you could split. Just depends on the complexity of your river strategy. Just when we see this size, it doesn't really tell us. Like he could be playing this and a big bet.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a spot I would expect a ton of big bets though, so it seems reasonable to play this. And basically, what you would do in this spot is you would play this that have some 3 bets. So sometimes he's going to go all in now versus this raise. Sometimes he's going to bet call and sometimes he's going to bet fold. But at least when your opponent has a hand like ace 5, if you have ace jack, you ensure that you get some value and don't just allow them to check back all their like showdown hands.
They've played quite a few hours with each other by now, but not nearly as many as they will, I guess, over the course of this month.
Yeah, they're going to... The thing that's always interesting about that is like it's because you're playing so many hands for so many hours a day, and then you take a break for the day and then you're back at it the next day. Is how much time do you have to actually study your opponent's tendencies? Those flush versus something obviously we don't know, but
yeah, just re-raise big with the flush. Almost at the bit. I'm
and
guessing the correct fold.
Yeah, I mean he is basically the worst possible flush he could have, and he raised, so you could assume he's raising every flush here, which obviously makes a lot of sense. He's not really going to have... I guess in this actual scenario, he could have a 4 high flush, but it's not super relevant. Not a huge difference between a 6 high and a 4 high flush.
And here we had raise from Chris Nguyen, 3-bet CD9K and called 4-bet rig deck.
And then...
Called by CD9K with 3-bet initially and now quarter pot on the flop. Jack 10-9.
Yeah, this flop's actually not amazing for the cold 4-better. It depends on the positions, I guess, but in this scenario, I would assume there's an advantage of sets for imposition, and then potentially straights and 2-pair as well. Well, definitely straights and 2-pair. So just pretty interesting. Again, at the lower S, when there's so much money in the middle already, it doesn't always matter about the nuts because you've pot left on the turn. If you have a good hand, it doesn't really matter if it's the nuts or not. You just like have it's easier to get the money in than if they were super deep with a lot of money behind. So yeah, not to say he can't bet that flop. Just this is actually one of the. If the board was slightly lower, it would be really bad. So if it was like 10-9-8, it would be terrible for rig deck.
Yeah.
Jack 10-9 is like definitely better, just because at least his broadways have a minimum a gut shot and 2 overs. So yeah, we see a check on the turn. Probably a spot where I would expect in position to go for a small bet when they do bet.
And it's quarter pots.
Yeah.
If you have aces or kings, I guess it's still a clear call for a rig deck.
Yeah, in this spot, like it's pretty miserable with aces, just because aces will actually block a lot of your opponent's potential bluffs in this spot, because your opponent could have a hand like ace queen that's bluffing. And yeah, it's just not fun when you have aces here. You have to think of your range as a whole, and aces actually goes down in your range a lot. Obviously, it's the best hand you can have pre-flop, but on this board, you're dead versus a straight, and you're pretty much dead versus a set. Whereas if at least you have pocket kings or pocket queens, you can improve to a straight yourself, and you have more equity versus a set. And then on this river, it's somewhat neutralizing in the sense that now out of position doesn't lose to, there's less combos of pocket nines, and now they don't lose to hands like Jack 10 anymore, but still, pretty miserable for out of position. They're mainly going to be bluff catching here. And it's one of those spots where it might not even be that great to call aces with a heart, because we miss a big one.
He had ace king on the button, CD9K.
Oh, okay. It looks like, oh, sorry, I'm looking at the, I didn't realize I'm looking at the stream, so I'm slightly behind you.
Okay.
Yeah, so he went for a bluff.
I can replay it. So we see
ace king, ace of hearts, yeah.
Raise 3 bets. Cold 4 bet. Button against small blind here. Are you surprised by him not jamming?
No, I think like this is one of the spots where once you determine you have a flatting range, having hands like ace king, and like, say you don't have ace king in range here, then you're gonna be pretty. It's gonna be pretty miserable whenever boards come that are good for ace king, right? So he definitely can jam here, but you should definitely call some ace king as well. And then again, maybe the spot people miss in this spot is the turn bet. People might be inclined to just like take their equity, right? They don't want to get jammed on, but this hand actually makes reasonable sense to bet the turn, because if you get jammed on, it's not that big of a deal. You don't have a ton of equity, but you block aces, you block kings, you can get your opponent off of ace king themselves, and then on this river, again, pretty miserable spot for rig deck no matter what he has. And having the king of hearts is pretty good, because you block a hand like ace king of hearts or king queen of hearts, which would be a very natural slow play on the turn for rig deck.
Yeah, I would never bet this on it. I would be like, I already see the flop.
Yeah,
I give up.
You don't, because when you bet, then you get jammed on, and then you rabbit hunt the river and see it was the queen of clubs, right?
And everybody knows you should not rabbit, but everybody does it.
Yeah, I can't not. I fold Jack 3 off in the big line. I still rabbit hunt. What could have come?
It's such a bad habit that everybody has somehow.
Yeah.
Oh, we got a 3-bet pots down there. Linus and Chris win. Button against small blind. And action on Chris win in the small blind.
I would assume on this texture, you're usually going to see bigger bets in a 3-bet pot. Yeah, like dynamic board. Basically, there's a lot of hands in your range that are trying to get the money in quickly, because the board's going to develop in a way that it's going to be difficult to put money in if you have to play a 3-street game too much. So if you play a bit bigger on the flop, you give yourself the ability to shove some turns when necessary. So he goes for pot, which is going to set up that scenario where on turns he can play shoves or at least big bets.
You say dynamic, it means like there's multiple ways you can play it, or is it like it's just a wet board, so you have to play if you're strong in it?
Yeah, the board itself was dynamic in the sense that there was a flush draw and like very connected straight draw cards. Yeah. So the more, typically what you'll see is like the drier the texture, the more locked down the texture is, you'll typically see smaller bets from out of position. So if, on boards that have trips or flop flushes, like those type of things, you'll see small bets. You'll also see small bets where out of position just has lots of like good hands that out of position, or sorry, that in position will struggle against. So boards like, double broadways. A lot of people will play small bets, high frequency. But the boards where sizing up makes a lot of sense is where there's like middling cards that the board will develop in such a way that you have a lot of hands that, if say you have jacks on 10-9-4, jacks is the best hand now, but it's not going to be the best hand on a lot of runouts. So playing a portion of your range that wants to just get the money in over 2 streets makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something I personally, I'm probably very bad with. I feel like in almost any position, if I 3-bet, I would almost always bet a third pot, no matter what the board is. So for sure, if I move up in stakes, that's going to cost me, and people are going to figure out how to counter that very well.
Yeah, the good thing about poker is it doesn't really matter what size you choose. Like, I'm just talking about like if you are able to implement the GTO approach,
yeah,
which isn't necessarily what everyone should strive to. Playing a simple strategy well is better than playing a complex strategy poorly, right? So if you play a smaller bet size than you're supposed to, but you play it very well, you're going to do fine. Even if it's not the optimal size, if you know what that strategy looks like, that's more important than like, the sim says I'm supposed to play 200% pot and check here. Well, is that really worth more EV than playing the smaller bet and understanding what it looks like?
And you talked about absolute top up, learning to, play close to GTO and stuff. How much of that do you think comes down to learning to simplifying very well?
Yeah, he does a very good job of like just kind of filtering out the noise. So you look at a sim, and his goal isn't to memorize, 17% this hand, 28% this. It's more just like, all right, what are my overarching themes, right? Like, what hands bet quite often, what hands never bet, what hands mix, and then like approximating how often you want to mix bets and checks and those type of things, right? And just giving himself a roadmap that's executable when he plays, right? Realistic, not trying to be too perfect. Just like, okay, this is roughly what my strategy looks like. This is roughly what my opponent's strategy looks like. All right, now let's just do the best we can to play well there.
That makes a lot of sense. That seems to be one of the keys nowadays to improve a lot and make it to those big games. I watched I read the article that I was telling you about Matt Marinelli, and he was explaining that also, like how he learned to simplify pretty much. Because nobody's gonna remember. I mean, maybe Linus can. He's like the only one that can memorize as close as possible to GTO, but not many people are capable of doing that.
I listened to like the Mechanics of Poker podcast recently. They had Yolan Cohen, I believe is his name, on.
Yeah.
French pro, and he didn't know as well. He won a memory contest. Like, he used to be a professional memorizer, let's say. So literally his skill was looking at images and remembering them, and he set the world record in his like first year of competing.
Oh my God.
It's hard to have a better memory than him for visual stuff. And so now he studies poker. Like, those seem perfect, right? Like, what's better? You're good at memorizing images, and then you have to play poker. But what he talked about is even he, like, again, he literally has world-class memory. He won a competition, and he still really emphasized the idea of like simplifying the sim into like something that's executable, right? So instead of worrying about frequencies, use more like 25% of the time, 50% of the time, like set like things that are more executable, rather than trying to be like, oh yeah, this frequency is 10%, this frequency is 40%. Like, it just becomes too convoluted. So it's nice to just like, if the best memory in the world has to do that, then I think we all should probably follow suit.
He made content sometimes too and streamed. I've watched him in the past. Fun guy to watch, and definitely knows his stuff.
I've liked his content. He makes some. He plays like some interesting styles in certain spots, and it's always fun. Like, just seeing other good players and the way they approach spots.
He's also pretty young.
Yeah, I don't know exactly, but definitely in his 20s.
What is it with those guys in there? The young crushers, they're all in their 20s. The new Tom Dwans, of the poker world.
Exactly. And I'm getting phased out. I'm an old man now.
You still got it. When I watch your videos, I can tell. And you post some hands. Some of the hands you post sometimes were crazy, like with the ace high calls and stuff. I'm like, how? Like, this is wild.
One of my favorite hands actually where I got hero called, where I shoved 3x pot on the river as a bluff, and I got called by like queen 7 high correctly.
Oh my god.
I was like, what is happening? Like, and it definitely was not solver approved. And I talked to the guy like now, he's like a fellow professional and stuff, and we've joked about that hand and stuff. But yeah, definitely the most owned I've ever felt. Where I was like, I'm bluffing, I'm trying to get this guy to fold like good portion of his range, and he calls me with queen high. So definitely thought I was over bluffing that spot.
Maybe that's the downside of posting some of these hands. It's like those guys get to see sometimes. But also,
Yeah,
I guess the upside is that you're gonna get paid a bunch too.
Yeah.
When you have it.
If this guy's paying me off with queen high, then you better be paying me off with top pair.
Oh, we got a big pot here.
Yeah.
Potentially.
There's a few turn raises. Okay, so one minus raises takes it down. We got this other one. Ace king. Sorry,
big
king
raise.
6-5 ace. Yeah. Big turn raise. Interesting. I'm assuming this wasn't 3-bet pot, so it's pretty interesting to see a big raise on the turn ace, just because, you know, out of position when they don't raise flop, they're repping a relatively narrow range. Pretty good river for out of position, because a lot of their bluffs will interact with the 4. 7-8, maybe even a hand like 3 deuce of spades, and then even a hand like 7-3 of spades. So some straights complete. Doesn't really hurt their 2 pair. So if you had ace-6, ace-5, even 6-5, or a set, obviously unless in position is river to straight themselves, not the worst river. But we do see a check.
If you have a strong hand, yeah, I was gonna say, if you have a strong hand here at CD9K, when and why do you check on the river? Like, would you ever check to try and trap if you think that villain maybe has something he might try to bluff with?
Yeah, if you have like some of your ace-6, ace-5 that check raise turn, they're gonna want to check, because yeah, so he doesn't go for it with the 3. Interesting. I think 3-6 is like one of those hands that could consider bluffing the river. Not mandatory. Obviously, you've like already put in a big raise with a pair that blocks some of your opponent's folds. But yeah, on the river, typically the hands that want to check are the ones that block your opponent's calls. So if you have like ace-6 or ace-5 yourself that check raise turn, those would be reasonable river checks, just because, as we kind of talked about, you block, like if you have an ace, your opponent's less likely to have an ace. So then you can let your opponent bluff the river when they have, jack 10 or, 8-9 or any of their missed spades.
Because we've seen some of those traps sometimes from people that held very strong hands to really try and allow somebody to bluff in position on the river. And I thought they did that very well, and it's like very hard for me to understand exactly like how deep this went in the decision tree.
Yeah, I think those spots are. So the good thing is, a lot of times as the aggressor, so if you were the prior street aggressor, so you check raise the turn, we'll say, as the aggressor, a lot of your EV is derived from betting, because that's you put your opponent in a spot where you've check raised the turn and then you're betting the river. So your good hands are going to want to bet quite often, as well as your bluffs, and like you're putting your opponent in a spot where you're trying to make as much of their range just like a pure bluff catcher as possible. So that's not to say you don't want to have any check calls, but a lot of your good hands will just bet themselves. Oh, we see another pretty hefty raise on the river ace. Based on the pot size, looks like it was another spot where that went like potentially bet, check, and then bet river. And we see like a decent sized bet and a large check raise. So basically this is going to be probably like ace jack or better. And then in position is just gonna, this is that's similar to when you check raise and bet the river. In position just has a bluff catch with all of his ace king, ace queen type holdings. So they have to determine, they can't just always call, they can't just always fold.
Makes a lot of sense. Everything makes sense when you say it, but I wouldn't be able to make sense of it myself, that's for sure, watching those guys.
Poker is a lot easier when you're just sitting on the sidelines watching the players that know what they're doing do it, right?
Well, not that much for me. That's what I'm saying.
But yeah, I'm actually probably gonna have to hop off now. We've been doing this for a little bit, and I gotta get to some other stuff. But this has been fun, and I'll probably hop on again sometime in the future.
Thank you so much for joining. It was a pleasure. And if you want to shout out, all your socials or anything you want, your friends, your family, go ahead. Now's the time.
Yeah, it's for sure. Just basically, if you go anything Poker with Risk, websites pokerwithrisk.com, and then you can check out YouTube, Twitter, Instagram are all Poker with Risk as well, and you can. If you've liked the way Armin's played and would like to potentially get coach from him in the future, myself and the other guys, then definitely check out our website and see if it's for you.
Thank you so much.
All right, yeah. Thanks, man. It was fun. Take care.
Bye. Very nice of Poker with Risk to, aka Ryan Risk, to join us. Make sure to follow him, guys. It was super entertaining and educative at the same time. Welcome to join anytime, my friends. It looks like the game are still going. It's the 3 tables right now with a lot of the same players. Linus still going strong. It's not quite dinner break yet, it looks like. And we got a hand here developing. Who's Armin? Armin is absolute top up. Who so far has been doing very, very good in this challenge. At the start of yesterday, he was up 150k from what I saw. And today I saw him with some pretty decent stacks as well. So obviously it's very hard to guess precisely how he was doing, but I would guess that he's almost definitely finished the day up, or up so far today, I'd say. So yeah, actually going into today, Linus was at the top of the leaderboard with 137k. And behind him is Rig Deck, 125k, and then it was absolute top up with 124. We've seen the biggest swing was apparently 54k upswing for Peter Knop. Definitely some very big swings for some of these guys. Yeah, Ryan Risk got me excited now for the hand that he was going to post later. Because I followed him for some time, and sometimes he posts hands that you just read and you're like, how? Like it's just ace high on the river, like jam for twice the... And some of them are hero calls from him as well. And I'm like, how did you do that? Where he just calls with ace high and somehow for like a massive pot ends up being correct. He definitely knows this stuff. We got Linus here. It looks like raise from Chris Wayne cutoff, 3 bets, Munez star on the button. And Linus called for in the big blind. And Munez star is going to keep it simple. Just going to go all in here with the Zerg Scourge avatar. Linus quickly folds. Oh, and we got a big one here. That looks like a 4-bet pot as well. Rigadek and Munez star. He's going to continue. That was 3rd pot. Oh my god, he's 6 suited. That's a 4-bet bluff. Right? Yeah, 225. 725, and then cut off against button, 4 bets. A6 suited, bets 3rd pot and gets it through. That's the dream, if you ever make this play with A6 suited, you're only really hoping to see a fold here, I think. Guys, just a reminder to make sure to follow Coin Poker on all their socials and streaming platforms. So that's CoinPoker_TV on YouTube, CoinPoker_off on X, CoinPoker on Instagram, and CoinPoker Official on Twitch. So big shout out and much love to them for organizing this amazing challenge here, going on for the entirety or close to the entirety of December, and that will also run through a little bit of January. We're playing 50 and 100s rake free between some of the best players in the world, and there are leaderboards involved where those players can qualify for some VIP games, and also an overall leaderboard which is in $EV, where at the end of the whole challenge the winner will win a Rolex watch. Let's see what happened here. Raised by Rigadek. Yes, start 3-bet ace jack suited in the small blind, c-bet small, and those get the win. Second pair. I'm a massive fan of these show tables. Like, we just keep seeing those hands. Because as much as we don't see whole cards all the time, now we do get to see a lot of the showdowns that we might have not seen otherwise. That's a big part of the fun for me here, to be able to see those. Chris to win with the open. Gets 3-bet by Munez. Back to Chris to win in the cutoff. He goes for the 4-bet. 2250. They're a bit deeper than 100 big blind. Looks like 120. King 10-10 rainbow. Action on the 4-better. Chris to win. He's gonna bet quarter pots. And gets a quick fold. Sometimes it's just that easy. Linus and Rigadek. Blind versus blind action. Ace 6 deuce. 2 diamonds. And he gets re-raised. Wow, okay. Went for quarter pots. Big raise by Rigadek. Linus with a quick fold. I feel like Linus might be the fastest player in those hands. And maybe I'm too much of a fanboy, so I'm not objective at all. Actually, that's very possible. That might be the case. But I feel like he's already made his decision in advance so much of the time here. There is never any Hollywood, any wasting time. He's just straight to the points. Raise, re-raise, all in, folds. Doesn't matter. He's fairly quick, I feel like. They're all pretty quick, to be honest, especially for the stakes they are playing. For some reason, if I'm playing 1-3 live, people are like taking 3 minutes to make a decision sometimes, but here that literally never happens. Linus playing another pot here with Chris Nguyen. Looks like button is his big blind. I believe there was a small bet on the flop, and now he bets bigger on his 6th turn. And on the right hand side, possibly a big pot developing. Chris Nguyen with the call. Is Mario Musbrook the GOAT of Triton? What do you think, Mario? Are you the GOAT of Triton? Wait, Chris Nguyen leads for quarter here. And on the other table, Linus fires a pretty big bet. What is happening there? Munez with the call. King 5 suited against jacks. Linus finding value. Chris Win on the left hand side gets the win as well. Okay, we can rewatch both of those real quick. This was raising a small blind, big blind calls. And then Munez check calls. Half pots. And Linus bet pots on the turn. And he spikes the king on the river. And Munez, tired of being pushed around, perhaps calls. His initial feeling was right, but unfortunately the king got Linus there. The other one. Raise 3 bets, 4 bets. That's the best part of short-handed as well. Is like they're really willing to play very aggressive here in some of these hands. So raise and a 3 bets. From Linus on the button here. Ace-9 suited. So Munez finding the 4 bet with Ace-9 suited, gets a fold from Linus. Now we're playing some cards. That's what I'm talking about. Look at every hand is a 3 bet right now here. I definitely feel like any lesser experienced player would start losing their mind very early playing with those guys, with all the action that happens, all the tough spot they're being put through. Sometimes when you watch poker on a stream or on TV, like in a stream game, even live, I feel like anyone might start thinking, how would I play this? What would I do if I were here? But I feel like right now, when I watch these guys play these high stakes, I'm almost getting anxiety at the idea of perhaps playing with them and how hard and difficult that would be with how good they are. But the good part of it is we get to watch and potentially learn a lot of stuff from them because they're all amazing. Linus is waiting for perhaps another table to open here. And he went for the raise here, it looked like. Turn, King of Hearts. And he goes for the overbets. That's the difficulty because it just feels like there's so many hands you can do this with, and it's very hard to piece it all together. When we had the jam here, I think it was maybe raise 3 bet, called 4 bet, jam, and it did get it through. Not a show table, unfortunately, so we won't get to see. DD9K taking a long time on this one. I mean, it's just such a... Looking at the board, it's so tricky here to really figure out what Linus could have. He does opt for a call. And the river is an 8 of hearts. Pairing the board and also completing the flush here. And a snap call usually means that there's a pretty good hand. CD9K really finding the trap. I wonder if he was maybe thinking about rejamming the turn. But that river definitely made his life easy here once he boats up. And Linus with the queen 7 off was trying to get a little, I mean, not even little, like very aggressive, I guess, here with this one. Unfortunately gets caught, and CD9K wins a $22,000 spot. Looks like Linus is in another big one here with Rigadeck. 3 hearts on the board and 2 spades. And this bet does get it through. Does get through, so just gonna take it down right here and now. Munez on the button, they would just let it go. Rigadeck, sometimes you just get a walk. Although we haven't seen too many of them. Up here though, looks like it was a fairly passive hand up to the river where we see a re-raise. On the button with 2 pairs, Christwin, not a believer, calls with the ace-9 and yeah, hands up in tech into value town here. Linus with a raise. Rigadeck 3 bets in a small blind. Ace 8-6 rainbow on the flop. And he fires for a bit less than quarter pot. Linus now with the decision. Calls. 9 of clubs on the turn. And I think they were near 150 big blinds deep at the start of the hand. Bets for pots. If Linus calls, that'd be pretty much what's in the pot left. SPR of 1 on the river. This looks very strong right now. Yeah, Linus does call. Queen of diamonds on the river. And Rigadeck checks this time around. Giving the closing action here perhaps to Linus. Now could check back or bet. He goes for the jam. Quick call. Ace king against king jack suited. So it really feels like some of these players have really picked up on how aggressive Linus can be, and they're trying to give him enough space to go for those big bets on the river, fully ready to. I mean, we see the snap call. So Linus losing some big ones here back to back. And again, going into today, he was the leader on the leaderboard with 137k, but things can change very quickly. We've seen over 50k swings already so far. That can happen. What format do you usually play, Johan? So I play pretty much 90% of the time cash. And usually no limit 50 is my main limit. Online and live I play the lowest there is. So usually in Vegas that would be 1-3. I think I have by now probably over 1,000 hours played live in 1-3. Which for somebody who's not full-time, for me it's like a decent amount. And I enjoy this game very much. I'm not a full-time player, I'm not a pro. I play what you could say recreationally. I really like this game. I was a pro player in 2 different video games, Warcraft 3 and Starcraft 2, so that's my background. And nowadays I still stream Warcraft 3 pretty much daily. And that was the original game that's kind of made me fall in love with video games. Christwin with the open in the cutoff, Munez star 1100 in the big blind. And Christwin 4 bets 2500. Lets it go. Ace king of suits. And that was gonna go in if there would have been a jam. Looks like cutoff against button. Check, check on 9-7-4 rainbow. King of spades on the turn. Regular deck's gonna bet 75%. Is Yuri going to join for commentary? Saw him tweeting it. Yep. I'm not sure when, but he will at some point, yes. I asked him what's his availability, so as soon as I find out, he can join anytime he wants, and he'll always be welcome. I look forward to actually commentating with him. Obviously, compared to any of these good players, I will never know nearly as much, so it's amazing to focus on hosting and leaving the detailed analysis of the action to the experts. And there's quite a few ones I think that we might have joining. I talked to Richie Lucky today. Was streaming on Twitch, and I'm sure he might hop on at some point as well. I watch his stream regularly these days too because he was playing cash. Very entertaining. The Wako hopefully will come on as well, but he's not available right now for a couple of days. But yeah, all of these guys, I really, really look forward. I mean, this was amazing listening to Ryan Risk. He's very, very good at explaining. I really recommend, like, if you guys don't follow him yet, to follow him on social media because that guy knows his stuff and he's entertaining on top of it. It seems like people are very hyped for Yuri to commentate as well. I can't say that I'm familiar with him yet, but that makes me very excited too about hearing from him. Linus, in another hand, big blind against cutoff. Against Chris Win. 9-9-4. Ace-9, so trips on the boards. And the flush gets in here on the river, backdoor flush. Linus leads out. How about quarter? And now the action is on Chris Nguyen, who's gonna raise. Not very big though, but very quick fold from Linus. He believes. He believes that he has it. Not gonna waste any time trying to pretend anything. So Linus calls in small blinds. Rigadek raises 3.5 and Linus just folds. And we got an overbet here actually. Single raise spot, overbet on ace-jack-5, button against big blind. Muniz gets re-raised, okay. Aces! Okay, we're gonna have to rewatch that here. Linus opens, Muniz defense, big blinds, check check on 5-8-5, deuce. Also check check. Interesting that Linus still not betting. Then Muniz on the river jack bets. Linus raises. And Muniz just lets it go, fully knowing that he'll get to see no matter what, and he sees the aces. Chris Nguyen now tangling with CD9K. Looks like cutoff against big blind. And we will see a showdown. Fourth. Plus the hand trying to get the win here in position. We're seeing some of the small bets here on the river. Queen 7 offsuit from Chris Nguyen will be good enough to scoop the pot. Ooh, some very fast 4-betting here. Linus open, got 3 bets, snap 4 bets, quick fold. Again, they're playing very fast, especially for these stakes. Okay, Yuri just replied. But availability, so trying to work out when we can have him on. Maybe from as early as tomorrow, who knows? And looks like Linus 3-bet here against Rigadek. Ace-Jack-3 rainbow. This is big blind against button. He's gonna c-bet pretty big. Gets called by Rigadek. He's got 9k behind, 6,000 in the pot. If you guys have any questions in the chat, feel free to go ahead. And again, really encourage you guys to give a follow to CoinPoker on all the platforms listed on the top right here of the stream. That's YouTube, X, Instagram, and Twitch. I expected a jam from Linus, but I think he bet half on the turn. And now Rigadek has pretty much half of the pot left behind. And Linus covers. There's the jam. No snap call this time. It's a show table, mind you, so even if Rigadek folds, he would get to see what Linus had. Obviously, getting to see is probably not as important as making sure he makes the correct decision. He goes for the fold, and that was the nuts here. King, queen, offsuit. For Linus, not finding value on the river. And on the left side, we also got a big hand developing here. Chris Win in the big blind against Linus on the button. 6.5k on a 10 river. What you think worse hand, Linus, value jam? I'm a low stakes player. I meant more questions about the challenge, not a proper analysis question. That's the worst hand. I mean, I can still try to answer. I guess any two pair. If he thinks that he might get heroed somehow. So yeah, it reds ace, jack 10, 3 deuce. That's a very good question, actually. Maybe even like ace 3. But I'll preface by saying that I'm absolutely terrible at this game, so. I think. Oh yeah, there was an interesting hand that just happened. Okay, we can follow those two at the same time. Let's have a look here. So raise from Linus on the button. Chris win 3-bet 1300 in the big blind. King 6-4, 3 clubs. Bets small, very small. Call. Check turns. Checks the turn. Linus bets half. Call. River 10, he checks. Linus gives up, and those were queens. On Chris win. Winning 6,500 pot. Pretty good. What do you think Linus probe frequency is on 763 suited? Guys, come on, no trolling, please. This is too much. That's too much. Come on. Don't do this to me. Oh, we had an overbet that got called here. Jack, Queen Jack suited for a flush. Mamma mia. Can we watch this as well? That was open, big blind defense. Any check calls on the 7 high board. CD9K bets big on the turn, call. And then the flush gets in on the river, check. And this time he bets 150%. And we see a call. And he backdoored the flush. I want to see you guys in the chat answer your own question, though. See how much better than me you do. Enlighten me, educate me, please. Linus completed in the small blind here. Rigadek bets half pot in position on a king 7-3 rainbow. And Linus check raises. Quick call, deuce of hearts on the turn. Ace king in theory. Yeah, that makes sense. Now Linus on a 4 of hearts river. Just want to open the action. And he checks. 800 in the pots. Oh, and we had... Looks like another nice spot here. First I want to see what happens there. Linus just lets it go. Okay, let's watch this. But this was multi-way, so button, small blind, big blind, checked around on the flop. Small blind leads out, call. And then on the river, Rigger deck in a small blind bets quite big, gets called by second pair, and he has 2 pairs. Oh, we got a lot in here. Wait, what? Linus is all in on king, king, queen, queen, 9, 3 diamonds. For 4 times the pot. And Munez is going to call with a king. They both have a king. This is one of the spots where he was probably praying there was a queen on the other side. For a second, I thought this might be a straight flush. But no, that only happens at the macros where people do this. At the macros, if people jam for 4 times the pots, there is never for any less than a straight flush here, or quads, I guess. He tried to get him to fold a chop, repping, straight flush, and quads. Really? Is that feasible at all? And in a big one, actually similar type of board here. With a lot of broadways, king 10 of clubs, jack 10 of spades, 8 of hearts on the river. No possible straight flush this time. And he's just going to check back with king, queen, and best queen jack suited, looks like. Linus winning the $8,300 spot here. Talking a bit more to Yuri Peleg about when we're going to have him on. I'm very much looking forward to this. I find like listening to those guys that are very good is extremely educative. They have so much smart stuff to say, and they explain it really well. So yeah, so far it's been exciting watching those guys play, but having someone that knows the game very well explain stuff on top of it, that's the nuts. And we see a 4-bet here. Looks like... Oh, it's all gonna go in actually. 21,000 sevens against aces. Ace on the flop. Okay, well the first one is definitely going to Munez star. Second runouts, Linus hoping for chop. Those pre-flop all-ins, I feel like I haven't really gone his way at all. It's kind of wild. Because he's doing so well in the challenge, and then when you look at the numbers at the start of the day, you know, it's like plus 132k. That's great. But then you watch some of these ends, and it's like, yep, like the pre-flop all-ins, I think he's just lost like 3 or 4 back to back. Yeah, because he had the 10 of diamond, and Munez can't have quest because he will 4-bet queen's free, so it's a free wall, could work with some players, not Munez though. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely makes a lot of sense there. And a quite big pot here, developing. Between Munez Store and CD9K, we're going to see a small bet being fired on the river. And that was a set of queens. Munez picks up a $6,200 pot here, right there. If I go quiet for a bit, it's because I'm trying to check if I can get any guests on with me. This is very spontaneous streams in terms of when the games are running, so I'm still here, just bear with me. All right, what's happening? King deuce, queen king here. Big bet fired by Munez. Gets called by Linus. Jack of hearts on the river. We're going to see a bet. Actually, on the right-hand side, we also have a potential big hand developing. Every table has some action. Yeah, there was also a 4-bet at another table, which Linus did take down. Munez fires pretty big. CD9K on the other table. Bets small and gets jammed on top of Munez with trips. King Jack, that was. Trips. King kicker. So Munez winning both pots here that were going on those two tables. Another 3-bet pot here. 6-3 deuce. Christwin continues the aggression with a small bet. We get a pretty quick call. 9 of spades on the turn. We're going to continue our check. That's a slight overbet. That's like pot plus $37.50. Interesting number. Gets called again. Queen of diamonds on the river. Already 10,000 in the pot. If you were to jam, that would be a massive overbet here. Christwin thinking about what to do. He bets half pot. So 5,200. Leaving him with 12,000 behind. Rigadek more than covers. Thinking about it. Trying to figure out what this might be. And he ends up calling, so 20,000 in the pot. Queen Jack offsuit will be enough. Rivered top pair for Christwin. Maybe at like 10s or jacks. All right, we got a re-raise here. Rigadek playing with Munya star. King 9-4. King on the turn. The pot's going to build up very quickly here. Once there is a call, ace of spades on the river, completing the flush. Who's got the trips? Deck goes for a small sizing. How do I win a star with a StarCraft player, maybe? Because that's the StarCraft portrait of Zerg. And he jams over the top. 23,000. Rigadek just has 7,200 left behind. And now he has a tough decision. This kind of feels like a king against a flush. Or at least that's what's been represented so far. Rigadek will let it go, and it was nines. Wow, okay. So he had the full house. He had it. And so that means that you got re-raised when you had a full house, right? That's the dream right there. Not much of a decision. Obviously not going anywhere. Talking to Yuri Peleg a little bit more about how to make our hours work. It seems like we have very different schedules. It's available way earlier in the day, which the games I think have been running at those times, so definitely worth considering trying to make myself available at those times so we can have a look at what's happening. It might be a slightly different pool of players as well earlier in the day that's playing, except probably for Linus that seems to be playing at almost every hour. But I think earlier today was the Jan Karadziordzevich that was already playing, whereas like now he's not really in the mix, it seems. Linus in yet another hand here with Chris Nguyen. 2200 in the pot. Check to Linus on the button. Who will bet on the bigger side. It's like 70%. And we got a call from Christman. 4 of hearts on the river, completing the flush. Check from Christman. Action to Linus on the button. And he snap checks back pretty much. And there was a flush. Some of these check back from Linus have been really good in guessing that the opponent might have a very strong hand there. And that was one of those for sure. He got check raise on the flop, called. Christman check called the turn, and then on a heart river, decides to simply check back. And probably very thankful that he did so, because it was second nuts, king 8 suited from Christman. Christman now blind versus blinds with Munez star. 10, 8, 4, 2 spades, 9 of clubs on the turn. So a big bet was fired and called. Checks. Munez star who checks back, and we see a jack of diamonds on the river, so 4 to a straight on the run out currently. And Christman will be able to win this one. I'll rewatch real quick. He bet half on the river, and that was enough to get a fold through. All right, we got a 3-bet now. Raise from Wiggledeck cutoff. Christman 750 on the button, and Munez star is thinking. And he goes for a big sizing. 2625. Mind you, this is button and small blind here. Yeah, cold 4-bets. Can be a little scary sometimes, and Christman will just let it go. I feel like Linus is almost the only guy in this whole thing that will sit at tables alone and just wait for people to sit, even though it almost never happens. Either he joins a bunch of tables where there's people, or if he's alone at a table like this one, nobody ever sits with him. And he's the only one that seems to be consistently doing this. Like, you would think at some point he'd be like, oh, they're never going to join anyway, so I might as well not even do that. But it's still, he has hope somehow that somebody will sit with him there. We see multi-way action here, where Linus continues our bets on the turn, king 9, 6, 8, and ends up getting check raised by Rigadek. He's just gonna let it go. Now Munez in position, last to act. It would be just the two of them if he were to call. Goes for the call, and a 5 of spades is the river. What do we do now, Rigdeck? He bets 10%. So 400 into 4,056.87 cents. Venus doesn't think for too long. He just calls. And that's a straight. 6-7 suited. Found a little bit of value on the ends. And on the turn, wasn't actually looking that good because he really just had bottom pair in the open-ender, but got one of the straight outs, unfortunately for him, I guess. The flush also got in, kind of preventing him from maybe betting more. This looks like a 4-bet pot right here. So I'm guessing CD9K raise, Munez star 3-bet, 4-bet CD9K bet, call 6,000 in the pot. Queen 4 deuce, 2 hearts, king of spades on the turn. And CD9K is going to continue here. Betting 2,400 to 6,000. It's called Jack of Spades on the river. CD9K with 4,700. 4.7K, sorry, behind. So less than half the pots. Does this ever not go in? It's gonna jam. Munez with a quick call. Ace king or top pair top kicker against a flopped set of queens. Let's rewatch. So 220, 700s, then 1900s. Bet call, and then jam. Yeah, that was definitely easy to play for Munez. Top set on the flop. Easy game. A massive pot here. Already 10,000 in the middle. It's just gonna go check check on the river. And Chris win is good. We didn't get to see a line. I think it went check check on the river. So raise 3-bet call. Big bet call. Checks on the turn. Linus bets. Call. And then deuce of spades on the river. Check, check. Queen 10 suited somehow here, good. Linus maybe holding a diamond. Trying to get away with this one. I got told that one of the players in the challenge wanted to come on to do some commentary at some point, but I'm not sure. I haven't found out which player it is now, but I've added him on Discord, so That's going to be interesting to hear from one of the guys in it. Okay, I need to rewatch this. We can check this way. So squeeze call. Wait. And then he 4-bet. Yeah, Linus squeeze. 4-bet. That's Chris win. And Linus jammed and got it through. They definitely haven't been shy. None of them about putting the whole stack in. But I think it's the right play, even pre-flop. And you see Chris win and City 9K here. Going hard at it on the turn. On an ace 8-7-4 run out currently. And City 9K, that will be enough for him to secure this very nice spot. Okay, we had a hand. This we need to rewatch. Let's raise and call. And CD9K check. So check, check. Check calls on a king turn and then river check. Big bet by Linus, call, and they have the same hand. Chop it up. Chop it up. Okay, Christwin raises in the small blind. 300. CD9K calls in the big blinds. We head to a flop of Queen 8-3, 2 diamonds. Check, check. Ace of hearts on the turn. Checks around again. 4 of clubs on the river. Who wants it more? Gonna see a small bet from Christwin, and CD9K couldn't wait to get out of there. He snap folds, and we had King 8 of suits from Christwin in a small blind, so he flopped second pair and became third pair on the turn, and that was good enough. Raise from Christwin, 3-bet CD9K with aces, insta-fold. Not what he was hoping to see. And we got a new player here, Beppe Bergomi, joining the fray on currently actually all 3 tables that are running. And get straight into the action here. 10-10 deuce flop. I think that was a check raise. And leads out pretty big on that 8 of diamonds turn. What's his avatar? I can't quite see. Ace of spades on the river. Did you actually check raise the flop? Because that's... I kind of feel like not a board you will see a lot of check raise on. And Pepe actually checks the river. So either he didn't like the ace, or he's giving up, or perhaps we'll find out. It's a show table, okay. And it was queen 10. Yeah, he was up against a 10. That's kind of hard to make somebody fold with such a hand here. Yeah, the raise wasn't very big on the flop. Maybe decided to try and stab early here after joining the tables. But gets off to a difficult start after losing this one. All right, guys. I'm gonna get some dinner, so I will be off now for a little bit, and then I'll see if the games are still running and how many players there are, and hopefully find a guest to join me again. That was really, I think, the highlight so far of this commentary. Let's watch this hand first here real quick, as we see a pot size bet, rig a deck on King Jack Jack 5, and with CD9K. That looks like under the gun and button, assuming Pepe was in the hand, and it's queens. That ends up being the winner. So yeah, gonna have some dinner, and then very decent chance I'll be back if the action's still going, which right now it seems like it's 3 tables with players. So thanks for tuning in. Again, big love to Coin Poker for organizing this World Championship. Make sure to follow them on all their socials and streaming platforms. CoinPoker_TV on YouTube, CoinPoker_off on X, CoinPoker on Instagram, and CoinPoker Official on Twitch. I'm Johan Merlo, your host, and I'll see you guys later. See you in a bit, guys.